Established in 1994 by the government of the Bahamas, Parliamentary Channel 40 broadcasts gavel-to-gavel coverage of the proceedings of both houses of Parliament, providing up-to-date information, including live interviews and historical data on the workings of one of the most important branches of government.
Well, welcome to the Parliamentary Channel's live coverage of Youth Parliament. Today, youngsters from across the Bahamas will be presenting addresses in response to a speech from the throne that will be delivered by someone acting as the Governor General. We understand she will be a female. The real Governor General, female Governor General that we had, the only, Dame Ivy Dumont, back in 2002, January 1st, 2002. Actually, she started acting in November of 2001, confirmed on the 1st of January, 2002. Well, we're going to have a reenactment of the opening of Parliament. Again, we're going to hear from someone acting as the Governor General of the Commonwealth, a young lady who we will tell you about a little later on in the program. At 10 o'clock this morning, we will hear from the Chief Clerk of the House of Assembly, Mr. Maurice Tynes, and then we will hear from the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture. Before we hear from the Minister, we will hear from the man in charge of the House. He is Dr. Kendall Major, the Member of Parliament for Garden Hills, and then we will hear finally from the Deputy Prime Minister, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey and San Salvador, Philip Davis. What we will do, though, Carla Palmer had an opportunity to speak with some of those responsible for organizing and directing today's events, like the Director of Youth, Mr. Darren Trinquast, who happened to have gone through this process himself. Some interesting personalities have gone through Youth Parliament. This is the 14th year of Youth Parliament, and so at this point, let's take a look and listen to Carla Palmer and a conversation she had with several of those persons involved in today's events. Here's that report.
Every year since 1999, young Bahamians between the ages of 16 to 25 years have been invited to participate in the annual event known as Youth in Parliament. While the idea originated with a group of students, Mrs. Patty Miller, now senior officer at the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, is credited with bringing to life its blueprint.
Bahamas, where young persons from the Caribbean came together to discuss various issues, and they met. Actually, they did 1 week in Eleuthera, where they did some training, and then they came back to New Providence, where all the young people met for discussions, and as a result of that, the idea was that we should have Youth Parliament in the Caribbean. Thus, we began Youth Parliament in the Bahamas in 1999.
Miller vividly recalls the first Youth in Parliament, even mentioning by name some participants, as she notes its impact over the years.
During the first National Youth Parliament, most people would know of Mr. Cassius Stewart. He was a participant of that National Youth Parliament, and during that time, it was actually the media really was impressed with Mr. Stewart's speech, and most of them gave him interviews at that time. So I am assuming that was the beginning of his political career. At that time, of course, Youth Parliament have grown. We have some other names. I can recall during the last election we had Mr. Howard Johnson, who was also a product of the National Youth Parliament. We have Clay Sweeting. Right now we also have Miss Ambrosine Hyler. She's an attorney, as well as Miss Sandina Mortimer Neely. She's also an attorney.
In many regards, participants of Youth in Parliament are privileged to be a part of a 14-year-old tradition. Darren Turnquist is one of them. At 32 years old, he has been sitting as the Director of Youth for almost 2 years. He stands as a testament to and a product of the program.
Experience in Youth in Parliament in both years would have been a really tremendous experience. At the time, we would have, had the opportunity to visit the Governor General. We would have had the opportunity to speak with the Speaker of the House, and really to have the opportunity to sit in the walls of this very historic place was truly humbling, and it kind of gave you that motivation, not to say be a politician or to be a parliamentarian or to say to go in government. Of course, it was never my intention to ever work in the public service. But for some way that parliamentary experience began a journey for me that I guess I'm on the path in that journey right now, and becoming the Director of Youth has been a part of that journey. Now being, I guess, the director in charge of, National Youth Parliament, it is it is an amazing experience because I now look at the picture of me, many years ago, having been a parliamentarian, and thinking at that particular point, did it ever occur to me that I would ever sit in the position as Director of Youth? No, never. And so now my usual speech to some of the youth parliamentarians is that it's not how you start, but it's how you finish. And while starting, you never know where you're going to end up. Back in, a couple of years ago, I'd have been sitting in the very, very same place that you're sitting in. Never, ever, to imagine that one day I would be the Director of Youth, now speaking to you years later. And so it brings about some emotions, but it brings about some pride because I now understand very clearly, having participated in this program, the importance of National Youth Parliament in the country. It is interesting that many politicians, many parliamentarians, many ministers come into Parliament and they listen to some of the speeches from these young people. And it is so fresh and so creative, how they express themselves, how they term different programs, how they name some programs, how they name some solutions to the issues that we face in this country, that some of the ministers walk away with actual answers to some national problems. It might not have been presented in the way that you would see, the program being presented at the national level once it's accepted. But after the minister puts it out there to his technical or her technical officers, then you have some true professionals that go behind the scene and really create some programs out of some very raw footage or some very raw material that's been presented by a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old. And so that shows the importance of youth in our country and the fact that young people have the answers.
Back in 2002, Amberzine Hyla was 18 years old at the time she participated in Youth in Parliament. Today, she's an attorney.
I'm actually quite enthused to be a part of it because prior to doing Youth in Parliament, I think there may have been 1 or 2 sessions before my time, but I definitely knew of a few persons from Grand Bahama who had participated before me. And being from Grand Bahama, coming into COB, I wanted to become a part of what was happening in New Providence. And Youth in Parliament was a good way to get started. The Ministry of Youth contacted some of the Grand Bahamian students here at COB, and we became involved in, that would have been 2002 if I'm not mistaken, or 2003. We would have sat in that session of Youth in Parliament. And no one had to put me up to it. It was an awesome experience. I remember meeting so many different people from different family islands, and a lot of us in the same age bracket, some persons a little bit older. And so you had a glimpse of what the future of the Bahamas could look like. And it was so interesting as a young person to meet so many like-minded individuals, and even persons who didn't share your point of view, but able to aptly express themselves. So that experience for me was truly rewarding and just a glimpse into what our Bahamas could look like by so many persons committed to making a difference, committed to making their contribution. My experience in Youth in Parliament, rewarding in and of itself, also afforded me the opportunity to represent the Bahamas at the Commonwealth Youth Initiative. And there was a parliamentary session held in Nevis, and I was the representative, myself and a young man by the name of Breon Davis. We represented this ministry at that event. And again, that would have been in the summer of 2003, if I'm not mistaken. And so, again, having sat in the Youth in Parliament session, already feeling so fulfilled, it was a platform for me to get my ideas out, no one else's. And then, on top of that, being asked to represent the country amongst other Caribbean youth at a session in Nevis, a place I'd never traveled to. Just the degree of exposure and the contact. I still keep in contact with persons from all over the Caribbean that I would have met at that session. I have a friend in Turks and Caicos, another friend in Trinidad, and we're still able to keep in contact and even share what's going on in the different jurisdictions based on that one experience. But I feel as though wherever we are, and I would want to encourage any young person, any Bahamian, wherever you are in life, you can make your contribution to this country. And it doesn't have to be frontline. So, you know, I don't know what the future holds, but my mantra at this time is to make my contribution wherever I'm at.
For more reasons than one, organizers of Youth in Parliament, past and present, recall the contribution of former political candidate for Bamboo Town, Cassius Stewart. In fact, he was the first speaker to ever address Youth in Parliament back in 1999.
My first brush with anything called politics, I never had any political inclination, and you know, I was a young entrepreneur at the time. My business was very successful. We were one of the first companies producing computers and manufacturing. And, you know, when I was introduced to this part of life, you know, fighting for issues and concerns, you know, that seemed to pull me away from, you know, my entrepreneurial pursuits. But we just wanted a better country. We wanted a better region. Because when you sit down and you speak with young people from Belize and Jamaica and Trinidad and Guyana, and we sat down and we talked about the issues that were facing them. I mean, some of our issues vary 1 or 2 degrees, but basically it's all the same issues. We don't have child abandonment in the Bahamas like they may have in some of the other Caribbean islands. But we do have the unemployment. We have the underemployment. We do have young people, ideas are always being pushed aside. And so we wanted to really make a statement that, listen here, give the young people a voice. You know, you cannot have this segment of the population that is experiencing so much pain silent. And I think this is the reason why we have so much problems in our societies now.
Still a strong supporter of the concept of Youth in Parliament, Stewart is of the opinion that by now, the program should have progressed beyond a one-day event.
What the Barbadian government did at that time was that there was a permanent structure for young people where they had, every week, they would go and meet and pass resolutions in youth parliament and then submit it to government. And those ideas were therefore, what was good was taken into consideration and put into practice. And so we were asking the Bahamas government, the Jamaican government, and several others to consider following the Barbados model of establishing a permanent youth parliament. But we just like show. You know, we think young people, you know, you let them put on a suit and go in parliament for a day and talk. That doesn't solve problems. You know, Einstein say you cannot solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions. You need the people of today to really come up with the solutions that they're experiencing, the problems they're experiencing. And so what we were fighting for then, you know, we crafted an intense document for the establishment of a permanent youth parliament in the Bahamas. We submitted it to the then government, and all the powers that be brushed that aside, you know. And so, but today the young people, the problem's still the same. And so all we were agitating for was that, listen, don't just give them one day to speak. They have a voice. Allow them to be a part of the solution of crime, the social problems, the economic problems. And that was the thrust then, and should be the thrust now.
Sitting as a result of the 40th year of independence, And this time we are partnering with the Ministry of Education. Education has identified some young persons who would have participated in the debate series, and those persons were identified, and thus they will be participating in this upcoming Youth Parliament. We have persons from the family of violence, we have independent schools, and we have public school students. And I would like to say thank you to the Ministry of Education, especially Mrs. Hill and Ms. Cater, Ms. Clark, Ms. Brown, all of those persons who have assisted us thus far.
Because the program is oversubscribed, applicants are encouraged to apply early. Applications are available at the end of September each year for hopefuls wanting to be a part of the impending year's event.
Persons will be asked to apply, and they will write a brief summary on a topic. The topic would be reviewed, and then persons will be identified based on the selection of the committee. And then the committee will make the selection of who will be allowed to participate. Some persons, they become exposed, they have the opportunity to travel and attend various international and Caribbean training sessions, and they also assist the Department of Youth in future projects and programs based on their training that they would have received and their exposure. This year, this would be the first time we actually have an opening of Parliament. So this would be something new, definitely. And there was a few years back, 2 years ago, while we were in Parliament, the Governor General invited us to a luncheon. I think the topic was citizenship at the time, and he was definitely impressed with the contributions made by the young people.
For the Parliamentary Channel, I'm Carla Palmer.
Carla Palmer and some of those involved in putting this event today together. In a few moments, we're going to go inside the chamber of the House of Assembly, where we will be welcomed by the Chief Clerk, Mr. Maurice Tynes, and then we will hear from the person in charge of the House, Dr. Kendall Major. He's the Speaker and the Member of Parliament for Garden Hills. And then we will hear from the Member for Carmichael, the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, Dr. Daniel Johnson. And then we will hear from the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis. And shortly thereafter, members of the House will retire here to the square, where they will hear the speech from the throne read by the Governor General. That person is Camille Mins. She's a national speech champion, junior achiever, and she's from St. John's College. The Speaker of the House today is representing the Pine Ridge constituency, former student of Anatole Rogers, Keith Roy. Also, we are going to see senators in a moment because they will also retire here to Parliament Square to await the arrival of the Governor General. The President of the Senate, Nikita Smith, a student of the College of the Bahamas. Acting as the Chief Clerk today in the House of Assembly will be Courtney Thompson. The Assistant Clerk will be Melbia Hall. Also today, we're going to be entertained by the Urban Renewal Band. It's going to be directed by Sergeant 2515 Campbell. We're also going to see the Royal Bahamas Police Cadets and the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Rangers. The parade commander will be Cadet Bryston Anderson and Ranger Tamiko Culmer. All of those involved today as we have the 14th edition of Youth Parliament. And in the piece done by Carla Palmer, you heard from Ambrosine Hyler, Cassius Stewart, some of those going through the Youth Parliament. and we're going to see how far this goes in terms of how quickly we move it from a one-day event to a two-day event and even further. We also want to tell you that, of course, in the square, family members and friends of those in Parliament today in the House of Assembly, and we will be here throughout the entire day. This entire session is scheduled to be completed around 5 this afternoon. The members should take a break for lunch around 1 o'clock, and who knows, they may be so excited about what they're doing, they may decide to work through the lunch break. We've been known for that to happen here in Parliament too. But again, we will see. In a few moments, as I said, those senators will arrive here in the square. Right now, they are in the Senate building, preparing to come outside again at 10 o'clock. We are going to go into the House of Assembly. We're going to have a welcome address by Maurice Tynes, the Chief Clerk, and then we're going to hear from the Speaker, Dr. Kendall Major, and then Dr. Daniel Johnson, Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture. Of course, this is an initiative from the ministry. I'm told that it was an idea put together by some students, but Patsy Miller took it and made sure that that idea lived. And so, in a moment, I'm told we're going to see senators coming into the square as we prepare to begin the ceremonies and activities today for Youth Parliament. Protocol Officer Terry Archer leading the senators now as they arrive in the square. President of the Senate, Nikita Smith, College of the Bahamas student. They are now repairing to Parliament Square. As we know, the Senate, 16 members. Also, I must tell you that the Urban Renewal Band is in waiting, preparing for this ceremony today. As we prepare for the 14th edition of Youth in Parliament, where the nation gets to hear in a formal way from the young people and the youth of the Bahamas. And again, these are students, high achievers, generally from across the country, all here today making their voices heard on issues of importance to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Again, Governor General Camille Mins, St. John's College student, Speaker of the House, Keith Roy, and the President of the Senate, Nikita Smith. Again, this event today will go throughout the entire day and will conclude at 5 with a resolution. And of course, it would be interesting, given the issues being faced by the country today, most of them involving young people. And so it'll be interesting to see what these young people have to say. As Cassius Stewart said in that piece, you can't solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions or something to that effect. And we believe we will hear from the students with some of the solutions they are proposing to the problems we face in the country today. Again, 10 o'clock, we will hear from Maurice Tynes, Chief Clerk, and then a charge, if you will, from the present leaders of the country, including the Speaker, Dr. Kendall Major, the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, Dr. Daniel Johnson, and of course the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis. Members will elect the Deputy Speaker. That will be part of the activities going on in the House of Assembly. Also an official election of the Speaker. As we know, the Speaker will be Keith Roy. And then they will come here to the square, where they will listen to the speech from the throne. And then they will go back to the House and make their presentations in response to what is communicated by the Governor General. At the moment, we are waiting to join Maurice Tynes in the House of Assembly, where he will begin today's proceedings and the 14th edition of Youth Parliament. Let's join Mr. Tynes right now.
And also has opened the doors with the able assistance of the Speaker of the House to you, the young people of this great nation. Mr. Tynes has been a mentor to me. He has been a coach to me, even when I was a youth parliamentarian. And so please, you all know what he's done for you so far. Ladies and gentlemen, please do what you do best and welcome Mr. Maurice Tynes, the Chief Clerk for the House of Assembly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turnquest. Deputy Prime Minister, Acting Prime Minister, Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Wells, welcome. Yesterday I told you all that it's a privilege to cross that bar to come into this chamber. I hope you all remembered that, because this is really indeed a privilege and an ideal opportunity, a unique opportunity for you all. When I was your age, there was no possibility of my coming in here and sitting in these seats. And so I am very grateful that the Ministry of Youth has decided to do this as an annual, not this particular one, but the Youth Parliaments as an annual event. I think this is one of the ways that we can expose young people to the body politic. And I'm still waiting for my first youth parliamentarian to get elected to the House. I told you yesterday, I thought I'd have some in last election because about 4 of them ran. But one of these days, I'm sure some of you will be here in the House. But please grasp this opportunity. We have a speaker who's really into young people, and he really wants to open more doors for you. So please use this opportunity wisely, like I told you yesterday, and make your parents and everyone proud of you. Okay? It's my esteemed honor at this time then to present to you the Speaker of the House of Assembly, the Honorable Dr. Kendall Major, underneath the Member of Parliament for Garden Hills.
I'm going to stand. Good morning. Good morning. Honorable members. What a wonderful opportunity for me to welcome you to this esteemed legislative chamber known as the Honorable House of Assembly. I am just certainly pleased to have my colleagues, parliamentary colleagues with us, the Acting Prime Minister and the Minister for Works, Brave Davis, Philip Brave Davis, and of course your Minister, the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, and the Parliamentary Secretary also in the Ministry of Works, the Honorable Renwood Wells. Mr. Tynes said it quite well. What a great opportunity for you to just be here this morning. You know, 40 years ago, when we celebrated our first independence, I was a young boy. Most of you all were not born. All of you were not born. Or else it wouldn't be youth parliament, would it? And for me, the only thing I remember about independence 40 years ago was there was the first ever independence track meet. And I was a member of a team that represented my high school at the time, or my primary school, St. John's Prep. And I ran 100 meters. 8 of us toe-to-toe. It was the first lesson I had in leadership. For the majority of that race, I was out in front, clearly in the lead. It was my race to win. But something happened. I looked around, and I didn't see anybody. And I started to look for persons. I turned left and I turned right, and you know what happened? My muscles tightened up. And next thing you know, 3 fellas flew past me, and I came fourth. It was the first lesson in leadership, and that is how to lose. So being in public life is about winning and about losing. I took that lesson with me, and here we are now, 2013, celebrating 40 years. And I have the privilege and distinct honor of being the 3rd youngest speaker in the history of our 284-year-old parliament. So it's a singular honor for me to welcome you to this esteemed chamber. We need young people to get involved. Unquestionably, this is your time. You are not the problem, you're the answer to a solution. And if we want to know what is happening with young people, with the unemployment, with the lack of education in some areas, with the crime, we need to speak to you because you have the answers. You are the experts in your division. And so this is an opportunity for you as experts to be solutions, to be answers, and to affect the positive change that this country has come to depend on. I've noticed in the resolution that you're debating today, you also spoke of having some legalized body for national youth development and a national youth development trust. These are important things that you ought to hold us to the fire on as legislators, to make sure that we continue to build that bridge for the future of this country, because the journey must continue with you. Finally, a part of the resolution that you spoke of remembering the principles that you were taught from our forebears. How fitting it is, particularly now in a country that so much is happening. We're becoming far too independent, but I think we need to become a little bit more dependent on God. Our principles, and we have lost, in some ways, our moral compass. And it is time for you, we look to you, to assist our country in bringing us back to the place where we ought to be. When the sermon was held in 1973 on Clifford Park, Dr. R.E. Cooper used a scripture that he thought fitting, that spoke to the time. It was from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. And it spoke of who he thought the Bahamian peoples are at this juncture. It says that we are a chosen people, a peculiar chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. With praise, we come from darkness into a wonderful light. Now, you know, when you think about that scripture, in 1729, when this parliament first convened, do you recognize that, you realize that four bills that became act in this parliament spoke of the control of slaves, how slaves were chattel, and how slaves can be passed on from one generation to the next. These were the laws that were passed 284 years ago. But yet, in independence in 1973, a sermon that speaks to you being a chosen people, coming from darkness to a wonderful light. So we are a great people. We are a great people because we have a great history. Embrace our history. Embrace the ancient principles so that we always look to the lighthouse and keep guided on the right foot as we move our country from strength to strength. So enjoy this moment in time. You are indeed chosen and you are indeed blessed. Now, for me, I have the singular honor of introducing a dear friend of mine from Dumfries, Cat Island, your minister, the Minister of Youth, Sports, and Culture, the Honorable Daniel Johnson. Welcome.
Morning, honorable colleagues. I have to tell you that it was my singular pleasure also, as when the House first opened under this class of 2012, that the Prime Minister then gave me the esteemed opportunity to be the first person to introduce the new Speaker of the House of Assembly, the Honorable Dr. Kendall B. Major. I'll give him a round of applause, please. Acting Prime Minister, Mr. Philip Brave Davis, Honorable Speaker, the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Works and Urban Development, Mr. Renwood Wells, youth parliamentarians and Bahamians everywhere, good morning. 40 years is a long time. It is a generation. And this year, we had the theme, The Bridge to the Future, the Journey Continues. I tell my friends and family I don't talk by politics, we show it. So today I'm very proud of the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, in particular the Youth Division, for what they have done in demonstrating our faith and how proud we are in you as a group of young people. Out there, people are talking bad about young people for one reason: they don't know you all yet. But I'm going to let them get to know you all, more about you, and they will see the great hope that we have in this country. It is you. 40 years we're building a bridge. In 1968, on the little island of Cat Island, there's a young man who grew up in the place that I'm named about, Dumfries, Cat Island. His name was Oscar Johnson Sr. In 1968, he was elected against great odds. He had run twice against the mighty H.G. Christie and Co., who had really completely occupied that land at the time. And he won this seat in Cat Island. He was from Dumfries. That's why they named me Dumfries. A few years later, a young man also from Cat Island became his NJC member, that is within our party structure, a National General Council member. That's a person who gets all the information and compiles everything for your constituency. And people weren't sure that this man should be the one. But my mother at the time said, yes, I guarantee you, he is the one. And that man now today, as we talk about bridges that continue into the future, that man became the NJC member. He now is the Member of Parliament for Cat Island, San Salvador and Rum Cay. He is now the Deputy Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And as we intend to build bridges not with blocks and mortar and steel, we're now building bridges with people like yourselves. I present to you a person you can build on, you can trust in. You could look at his life and take it as an example as to how far you can come. Because today he is now the acting Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Ladies and gentlemen, Philip Brave Davis.
Mr. Speaker, and to my parliamentary colleagues, let me just join the chorus of welcome here to our youth who are here today in Parliament, especially to the member of Cat Island, Ashley, who is here to debate this very timely resolution that I have just seen. It is important that we expose our young people to the workings of democracy, to the workings of what makes a nation. You cannot truly build a nation unless you know the fundamentals that make up the nation. What are the pillars of a nation? What it is that, as I said, what are the fundamentals of a nation? As you would have heard from our speaker, the first Parliament was in 1729. Parliament comes about as a result of a construct of how we govern ourselves and how we put checks and balances to ensure that those who have do not trample upon those who do not have. Checks and balance to us to our own individual rights and freedoms, so that you who live in a community, who live in a nation, will know how far to conduct yourself against and with one another and between one another. And it sets up a program where there could be wide public discussions to shape our nation and to decide where you want to carry your nation. And this is the forum to which it is done. Right? You are elected to Parliament. You were elected as the Member of Parliament for Michael Gibson. And that is because the people of Michael would have said, this is the person who will best serve my interest. Then you are appointed here. Then you have what we call the separation of powers. Because you are powerful. Now that you're a Member of Parliament, you are powerful people. And so to put a check on your powers, you are checked by what we call the various arms of government. Again, one of the fundamentals that make up our nation. So you are today sitting as the legislature, right? The leader of the legislature, and who will be your boss, Madam Centerville, as Prime Minister, is the Speaker. He is the leader of all of us, despite where we may be sitting and what position we may hold. So, as Prime Minister, you lead the executive, which is another arm of government. And then, of course, there is the judiciary that ensure that we are acting in accordance with the laws that we create and which govern all of us. And so you have on the one hand the legislature, which is the expression of the will of all of our people, because they would have elected us to Parliament. Then from those elected bodies, you then have your cabinet, which is then headed by the Prime Minister, and they are what you call the executive arms. They are the managers. They manage the affairs of the country. They carry out the policies and the philosophies of the party which elected them, and they manage the country. And then we have the judiciary, which is headed by our Chief Justice, who will ensure that we act in accordance with the law. And of course, most of these things are contained in what we call our supreme document, our Constitution, which sets about and obligates us to abide by what is called the rule of law. And that is, in essence, what I wish, I'm happy to see that we're exposing our people to. You know, we have, our country has a lot of challenges, but it's truly heartening, heartwarming to recognize and to see that we are not lost. Very few bad apples amongst us that grab the headlines sometimes overshadow the good that we have here today. And it is important for you to appreciate and understand that you are good people. We are a good people. And yes, there are a few amongst us that may be a bad apple. But it is heartening to see. I mean, it's a wonderful feeling to be here and amongst you, to see that our future is bright. The class of 2012 that followed the 2012 election, they are called and deemed the new generation of leaders. You are the next generation of leaders. And I hope when I am in my rocking chair in Old Bight Cat Island, I'll be looking at you all here, doing what I am doing now. This is the 40th, as it's indicated, there's 40 years of generation. 40 years is a generation. Our country has now gone through one generation. You would note that most of the new generation of leaders that are presently in Parliament are just at the cusp of 40. And the next 40 years is going to be left for you all to carry this country. So I invite you to participate, to not just sit idly by and allow the little bad apples that seem to sometimes detract us, discourage us from what is best of us. And so may your Parliament experience today inspire you to be here one day, and one day soon. Check with me. We will help you get there. I thank you.
Thank you, Father, for this wonderful day. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity for each and every one of us to voice ourselves on behalf of the youth of our Bahama land. As we stand here to be heard, I ask it that you allow the government to acknowledge and act upon our words. This is my prayer in your name. Amen. Amen.
Whereas the Commonwealth of the Bahamas celebrated its 40th anniversary as an independent nation on July 10, 2013. And whereas the entire year of 2013 will be designated to observe and commemorate the achievements of Bahamians over the past 40 years. And whereas the young people of the Bahamas have distinguished themselves both locally and internationally in academics, in culture, sports, and entertainment. And whereas the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture, in conjunction with the 40th Independence Commission and the Parliament of the Bahamas, has organized the Youth Parliament for Friday, the 26th of July, 2013, to commemorate the 40th anniversary of Bahamian independence and to highlight and underscore the achievements of Bahamian youth. And whereas youth parliaments are very useful and practical forums to expose young people to the importance of public debate, free speech, and the political process. And whereas the parliamentary process is a practical and simple means of reinforcing a national commitment to self-discipline, industry, loyalty, unity, and abiding respect for Christian values and the rule of law. And whereas the Parliament of the Bahamas supports and exposures to the participation in the political process by young Bahamians. And whereas this youth parliament is expected to be conducted with decorum, temperance, and prudence, now therefore be it proclaimed that this youth parliament duly assembled shall meet and transact business in the House of Assembly this 26th day of July 2013 at 10 o'clock forenoon. Camille Mins, Junior Governor General. I invite honorable members to elect from among yourselves a member to be Speaker of this youth parliament.
Madam Chair, I stand to move that the honorable member for Pine Ridge be elected the Speaker of this youth parliament.
Is there a seconder?
Madam Chair, I rise to second the motion that the honorable member for Pine Ridge be elected as Speaker of this youth parliament.
It has been moved and seconded that the honorable member for Pine Ridge be elected Speaker of this House. As many as are in favor with the nominations will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The honorable member for Pine Ridge has been elected Speaker, and I invite the honorable member to take the chair.
Honorable members, I am not unmindful of the honor which you have conferred on me today in electing me to this highest of office, that of your Speaker and your servant. It will be my aim and duty to uphold the principles and traditions of this House and secure for each member the right to express his or her opinions within the limits necessary to preserve the decorum of this House. I pledge to recognize the rights and privileges of the honorable members and the House itself. I wish also to assure you that I will preside in a manner which will facilitate the transaction of debate in an orderly manner, and above all, I will seek to be fair and impartial in the decisions, the rules of this Parliament and yourselves entrust to me. I invite honorable members to elect from among yourselves a member to be Deputy Speaker of this Youth Parliament. The Chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to move that the honorable member for Nassau Village be elected as Deputy Speaker of this Youth Parliament.
Is there a seconder? The Chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion that the honorable member for Nassau Village be elected as Deputy Speaker of this Youth Parliament.
It has been moved and seconded that the honorable member for Nassau Village be elected Deputy Speaker of this House. As many as are in favor with that nomination will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The honorable member for Nassau Village has been elected Deputy Speaker.
As we look at live pictures of Parliament Square, where in a moment we will see the Governor General. Today, she is Camille Mins, a national speech champion, junior achiever, as we look at pictures of the Urban Renewal Band under the direction of Sergeant 2515 Campbell. We're also going to see the police cadets as the Governor General arrives for the ceremony today. The color guard, of course, will be made up of the Royal Bahamas Police Cadets as well as the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Rangers. Camille Mins, the Governor General, escorted by Protocol Officer Terry Archer, being greeting now the Speaker, the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, and of course the Deputy Prime Minister. Also the Director of the new Oral History Institute, Dr. Camille Thompson. Also the co-chair of the 40th Anniversary Independence. Governor General inspecting the color guard. You see pictures of the Urban Renewal Band and Governor General Mims. Shortly, members of the House of Assembly will repair to the square to hear the speech from the throne to be read by Governor General Mims. Again, the Urban Renewal Band, directed by Sergeant 2515 Campbell. And of course, the Color Guard, made up of Royal Bahamas Police Cadets, Royal Bahamas Defense Force Rangers. They are under the command, the parade is under the command of Cadet Bryston Anderson and Ranger Tamiko Culmer. As the Governor General has a few words with members of the Rangers. Again, shortly, the Governor General, that is, return to Parliament Square to await the arrival of members of Parliament who will listen to an 11-page speech from the throne, she told me yesterday, unless somebody had a word with her and she decided to cut it short. 11 pages, she said. She's got a lot to say. And we expect that all of the members of Parliament will have something to say as well in response to Governor General Mims. She completes the inspection of the guard. We'll take the salute.
Brethren, follow now. Go on.
The Governor General now ascending the dais. We'll await the arrival of members of the House. As we see pictures of the color guard now, members of the House will come to the square for the reading of the speech from the throne, after which they will return to the chamber and begin debate. We expect this first morning session to last until about 1 o'clock. Then they will take an hour's break for lunch, possibly an hour and a half. We expect them to resume the session at the latest 2:30 as we look at pictures of that urban renewal band under direction of Sergeant 2515 Campbell. As they parade away from the square down Bay Street, traveling west. The Urban Renewal Band, as well as the Royal Bahamas Police Cadets, as we look at pictures of Governor General Camille Mins. She awaits the arrival of members of the House of Assembly. She's a national speech champion, junior achiever, a student of St. John's College. As we look now at the House of Assembly, where they are waiting to be summoned to the square, actually, by the Governor General. Chief Clerk Maurice Tynes doing the honors. Well, let's join them now.
Mr. Speaker, I am directed by Her Excellency, the Governor General, to demand the immediate attendance upon her in Parliament Square.
Hey, Colin. Only got on there, so how many could it be?
Honorable House of Assembly.
Brennan, you could hear me? One, two, 1, 2.
You loud clear.
We, meaning members of the House of Assembly, led by the Speaker, Keith Roy, former Anatole Rogers student, all of the members now going to the square, where they will hear the speech from the throne. All constituencies represented here today. And again, of course, once the speech from the throne has been read, then the Governor General will leave, and then members will return to the chamber to begin their debate. And hopefully, as we continue to say, as we watch members make their way from the House, undoubtedly they will all remember this day when they actually sat in the seats as members of Parliament, and of course family and friends are down in the square. And of course we know that tourists is always an occasion when there is an event happening on Bay Street. There's a crowd waiting to see or looking to see what is going on. And today, Parliament Square is relatively full. As we see now that members they've all left the chamber. Assistant Clerk Lee Ramming, the last one to leave. And of course now we're looking at pictures of Governor General Camille Menz as she prepares to read her speech, which again, as we see the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Works, Renwood Wells, and behind him, Jack Thompson, Coordinator, of course, the Speaker, Acting Prime Minister Davis, there in the square, all awaiting the members of the House, led by the Speaker, Keith Roy. They're now walking through Parliament Street and will turn east on Bay Street. Tell you the Chief Clerk in the House today is Courtney Thompson, and the Assistant Clerk is Melbia Hall. As they travel north towards Rogers Wharf into Rawson Square, where they will then walk south. We see them arriving now, coming towards Parliament Square, where the Governor General awaits. Again, Speaker Keith Roy, along with the other members of Parliament. Senators are already seated in Parliament Square. As we hear the applause from family members and friends, well wishes. All constituencies represented here today. Again, Camille Menz, the Governor General. We have had one female Governor General, Dame Ivy Dumont, from 2001 to 2005. Career educator, at some point serving as the Minister of Education. But today, Camille Menz, the St. John's College student, national champion, speech champion, junior achiever, as she acknowledges all of the members of Parliament. Again, this is the 14th staging of this Youth Parliament, where young people from across the country get the opportunity to air their views on issues of national concern. Governor General Minns now receiving her speech, and we will go now and join her as she delivers that speech to members of the House. In Youth Parliament.
And members of the Honorable House of Assembly. Today's opening of Parliament follows upon my government's election to office. It was 40 years ago that the Constitution for our nation was skillfully crafted by a group of brilliant and determined young architects that our nation now refers to as national heroes. It was at this time that the 23-year-old Sir Lyndon Oscar Peabody, along with other architects and visionaries like Roland Simonet, Milo Butler, Alvin Brannan, Henry Taylor, and countless others, drew up blueprints for our nation on the national commitment and foundations of self-discipline, industry, loyalty, unity, and whether you agree or not, an abiding respect for Christian values and the rule of law. My government has understood for some time now that we have traveled a tremendous road, making monumental advancements and moving the Bahamian people forward, upward, onward, together. However, we are at a point in our independence life where we have encountered what can be considered a sea of adversity and turmoil right before us on our journey. And now we are wading in its treacherous currents. My government makes no mistake in saying that what is desperately necessary at this time is a path to deliver us from where we are presently to where we ought to be. What we need is a bridge to the future, as this journey continues now. In the opinion of many, this bridge is without a doubt the youth of the Bahamas, individuals between the ages of 15 to 35 years who have the capacity and full capability to build on the bedrock foundation that was started over 40 years ago. Madam President and Honorable Senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly. My government understands the importance of overcoming our current adversities, and meeting the challenges before us recognizes that our efforts towards youth development need to be greatly intensified. Therefore, we present a vital national youth agenda for this new Parliament. Within this agenda, 3 critical pillars exist that will support this bridge: youth policy, youth institutions, and youth in education. Madam President and Honorable Senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, the National Youth Policy is a legally binding commitment towards youth development between the Bahamian youth and the Bahamian government, who is absolutely determined to pursue this much-needed policy with unbounded energy, imagination, perseverance, and unwavering dedication. The National Youth Policy addresses the following. Firstly, identification and self-awareness. We find today that our youth are unaware of exactly who they are because they do not know from whence they came. there is a problem as it relates to their lack of identification and self-awareness. It is because of this that the active participation of young people in the defining of the Bahamian identity, Bahamian culture, and Bahamian values, and therefore themselves, through free expressions of their own creative potential, is required. Any nation where its youth don't know their own personal value, worth, and rights, and the sacrifices that brought them to where they are today, is a nation that is lost. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, my government will reintroduce the National Youth Awards to enhance the self-esteem and pride of young persons in personal and community achievements and projects, and enhance the public perception of youth as partners in the development of our nation, while promoting more positive images of youth in media. My government will establish an island exchange program so as to encourage and enhance the knowledge and appreciation among Bahamian youth of the cultural diversity and uniqueness of the Bahama Islands. Secondly, education, technology, and capacity building. Our young people need to know the opportunities they have. As one government, we need to improve the professional development and social integration of youth through the systematic enhancement of quality, formal, and informal education. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, my government will provide youth-friendly access to information on youth services and programs on all islands through its creation of a national directory of youth services, in an effort to allow young people to make healthy and informed choices about their own well-being, so as to educate the Bahamian youth on all the opportunities available to them. My government will establish at least 6 virtual youth centers, which will provide upgraded access to and in use of information communication technologies for recreation, information, and development purposes for young people across all islands of the Bahamas. Thirdly, employment, social enterprise, and young professionals. This particular thrust is to facilitate economic development through increased employment, self-employment, and more competitive career opportunities for young people as we push to eradicate this 30.7% unemployment rate plaguing our young people aged 15 to 24, according to the Department of Statistics. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, my government will introduce a financial literacy program into 20 junior high schools in the planning period to create a culture of entrepreneurship, savings, and investment in young people in order to enhance enterprise skills and competencies among Bahamian children and youth through programs such as Junior Achievement. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, my government will also fine-tune the Self-Starters program to ensure its proper execution and enhance the capacity of at least 200 Bahamian youth annually to be self-employed and to access livelihood opportunities with the purpose of enhancing the economic participation. My government will establish a national task force for the youth employment policy to expose job market data on job demand and relevant skill requirements. My government will enhance the National Job Preparation and Mentorship Facility to ensure entry of at least 170 youth per year into career fields of choice through its review and upgrade of the Fresh Start program, and implementation of a career planning program. All of these efforts are to ensure that our young people are trained to enter the highly competitive workforce that exists, not only locally, but globally. The fourth area addressed in the National Youth Policy is that of health, sustainable livelihoods, and the environment. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, my government will establish a national program of service and civic engagement accessible to young people aged 15 to 35 in the community to attempt to boost the decision-making capacity among young people as they demonstrate national pride through its continued involvement in programs such as Volunteer Bahamas, Youth in Action, and the Governor General Youth Awards. My government will also introduce peer education, community advocacy, and outreach programs in all islands to promote healthy behavior and lifestyles with the intention to enhance the overall quality of youth well-being and the willingness of young people to serve as peer educators, as well as their participation in community and national events. Fifthly, youth in conflict with the law, access to justice and safety. We must ensure that all young people of the Bahamas have every opportunity to participate fully in the lives of their own nation. If we allow our young people, including the socially excluded, to remain in our nation's margins, we will become impoverished, I assure you. As we commit ourselves to moving forward, we leave no one behind. And the only way to do this is to encourage legislative development and enforcement that will promote fundamental human rights, the rights of youth, and juvenile justice reform through meaningful access to justice for young people. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, my government will contribute to the creation of more opportunities for young people, especially at-risk youth and youth in state care, to participate inclusively and meaningfully in development, life skills training, and exchanges with other young people, as well as sporting activities. Finally, the National Youth Policy calls for the inclusion in the decision-making process and youth empowerment. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, my government will strengthen the capacity of at least 500 Bahamian youth for democratic governance, leadership, and the management of effective networks through its advancement of the National Youth Council. My government also reaffirms its commitment to the implementation of this here National Youth Policy and Action Plan, as it fully recognizes that with our young people as our greatest human asset in the development of this growing nation, it is absolutely necessary that they are provided with the enabling and meaningful environment to do so. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, in order for the National Youth Policy just outlined to be effectively implemented and create an enabling environment for youth development in the Bahamas, the adoption of the National Youth Policy must be accompanied by the necessary supplementary and institutional framework to support and oversee the process. My government will introduce a compendium of pro-youth legislation alongside the National Youth Policy, namely National Youth Commission Act, the National Center for Youth Development Act, and the National Youth Council Act. Under the National Youth Commission Act, my government will disband the present National Youth Advisory Council and replace it with a statutorily empowered Youth Commission, whose role will include the regular assessment of the policy, reviewing and recommending youth-friendly legislation, advising the government on all matters relating to young people, including human resource matters for staff within the Ministry of Youth. The Commission ought to also function as a regulatory body to oversee all youth organizations, youth programs, grants and disbursements to youth bodies, and to act as a check and balance system for government agencies that provide programs and services to young people. Under the National Center for Youth Development Act, my government will create a National Center for Youth Development within the Ministry of Youth, to be led by an Assistant Director of Youth. It will primarily be responsible for the monitoring, evaluation, and implementation of the National Youth Policy, along with coordinating timelines and benchmarks for the National Youth Policy. In addition, the National Center for Youth Development will be commissioned to undertake routine studies on youth in the Bahamas and to document its findings so as to provide a focal point on youth-related issues in the Bahamas. It will owe a fiduciary duty to young people to report accurately and ought to be governed by a statutory instrument that will outline its roles, functions, leadership, and structure, and to facilitate its ability to exercise its authority when interacting with government and non-government organizations. Under the National Youth Council Act, my government will formally recognize a National Youth Council and its role to advocate and lobby as the national bargaining youth body representing all youth organizations registered within the Ministry of Youth. The National Youth Council is to act as a non-partisan, youth-led national organization whose primary duty is to protect the national youth policy and to hold the government accountable to the implementation and enforcement of provisions within the national youth policy. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, any focus on youth development and nation building is pointless without particular emphasis or concentration on education. That is the skills and knowledge that today's Bahamian students need to prepare them for tomorrow. You see, the skills that they will need in the future are markedly different from what this present education system provides. Many countries have accomplished significant feats simply by reforming their education system. If we can invest the necessary human and financial resources into our educational system, we too can make vast accomplishments. One crucial area for immediate responsiveness is to update the school curriculum. In this vein, my government will take steps to include the history of the Bahamas to 1973 on primary and secondary school curriculums through its implementation of a national Bahamian civics curriculum, so that the socio-historical development of which each Bahamian student is a product is understood. In this way, it is certain that the history of great Bahamian heroes is never forgotten. The common perception is that those who criticized this generation forgot who raised it. And if we are to inherit this nation that is rightfully ours, we must build upon the one wealth they cannot take from us: our education. Madam President and honorable senators, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, as my government puts down its foot and commits to the tasks outlined above, it remains mindful that God must come first, and mindful to the principles of accountability to the people, especially the young, righteous governance, and transparency in the decision-making process. The challenges the youth face will not be solved in one meeting, in one day. It will not be resolved in even a week. The change we need will not come if we wait for some other person, or if we do nothing and wait for some other time. The time for us to rise has long passed. We are undoubtedly the generation that we've been waiting for. We are the change that we have sought. We are the hope of every Bahamian who has been told that they cannot have what they dream, that they cannot be what they imagine. We know what began as a whisper has now intensified into a chorus that cannot be silent, and that will ring out across this Bahama land as a hymn that will heal the very bones of this nation. We are Bahamians. And it is up to us, and only us, to make this time different than all the rest. Among many things we as a country need, we need to be socially united. We need to be environmentally conscientious, and we need to be economically buoyant. The only way to achieve these goals is by understanding that with no change, there is no progress. And we must begin to know change in order to know progress and embrace this very concept. It all means accepting the fact that the young people are the way to a brighter and better Bahamas and more attainable Bahamian dreams. We are the bridge. This journey continues now. I pray the blessings of Almighty God may rest upon your deliberations and indeed your youth.
Junior Governor General Camille Mins. Camille Mins, the Junior Governor General, done delivering her speech to members of the House and Senate. Now preparing to depart. Let me tell you, as we look at the Junior Governor General, that the young people will be treated to a reception this evening at 6 o'clock at Government House by the Governor General. So for folks, as Junior Governor General now departs the square. Acting Prime Minister Davis we see in the square now to prepare for the departure of the Junior Governor General.
Honor guard. Show the colors.
The Junior Governor General taking the salute now, preparing to depart the square, saying goodbye to Dr. Tracy Thompson, head of the Oral History Institute at College of the Bahamas. House Speaker Dr. Kendall Major, Dr. Daniel Johnson, the Minister of Youth, and now Acting Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis. Members of the House now will return to the House and begin debate on the speech from the throne. Junior Governor General Camille Mins, certainly at the end there, focusing very much on the youth, as you would expect that she would. As we look now at the color guard. And the Urban Renewal Band, directed by Sergeant 2515 Campbell. Color guard, which we will see in a moment, Royal Bahamas Police Cadets. Bahamas Defense Force Rangers. Again, this band under the direction of Sergeant 2515 Campbell. In a short while, we will return to the House of Assembly, to the chamber, where under the direction of Speaker Keith Roy, the youth members of Parliament will begin debate on that speech from the throne. Again, members of the Youth Chamber waiting the signal to return to the chamber. The establishment of a National Youth Council, a National Youth Policy, a National Center for Youth Development, a revised school curriculum focusing on Bahamian history. Sergeant Campbell and the Urban Renewal Band parading on Bay Street. And again, the color guard made up of Royal Bahamas Police Cadets, Parade Commander Cadet Bryston Anderson, Ranger Tamiko Kalma.
Parade will move to the right. Right turn.
Again, visitors and guests getting a view up close and personal of pomp and pageantry this morning, albeit on a minor scale of the 2013 Youth Parliament. This is the 14th time it will be convened. Cadet Bryston Anderson and Ranger Tamiko Kalma leading the color guard as they depart the square as well this morning. Again, a goodly crowd made of residents and visitors alike. Something for their scrapbooks when they return home, and something for the history books here. Certainly for those involved in the ceremonies this morning, as we see the Director of Youth, Darren Turnquest, and then the Speaker, Keith Roy, with his Chief Clerk, Courtney Thompson, and Assistant Clerk, Melbia Hall, and other members of the Assembly, junior members we will call them, all. Returning now to the House of Assembly, where they will take part in this historic 40th anniversary staging of Youth in Parliament. And as the Chief Clerk, Maurice Tynes, said at the beginning at his welcome, in his welcome to the youngsters, as we see pictures of Acting Prime Minister Philip Davis and Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Hubert Minnis, also the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Works as the Acting Prime Minister. Deputy Prime Minister Philip Davis is also the Minister of Works. They depart the square now, and we say back to their substantive duties, their obligations here in the square having been completed. Again, in a moment, members, all of the young members will return to the chamber as we look at live pictures of them returning from the square and preparing their notes. For this debate, which we expect will go into the 1 o'clock hour, where members would then take a break for lunch and return at about 2:30. Director of Youth, Darren Turnquest, returning to the House. Shortly we will go back to the chamber as the members ready themselves to begin this debate. That they are now going through whatever preliminary arrangements and whatever preparations they need to make as they prepare to formally re-enter the chamber. And begin this debate here, the 40th anniversary edition of Youth Parliament. Again, we expect the young members to address those issues raised by the Junior Governor General, Camille Mins, as we see the Chief Clerk, Maurice Tynes, and the Protocol Officer. We will, as they continue to prepare to begin this session, we're going to take a short break, and we will be back in a moment as they prepare to start this actual debate today here for the Youth Parliament 2013.
Dwell on all the face of the earth, and had determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if happily they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. For in him we move and have a being, and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offsprings. For as much then as we are the offsprings of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone, graven by the art and man's device. And the time of this ignorance God winked at, but now commanded men everywhere to repent. And Paul continued his discourse, introducing the unknown God to a world that was steep in idolatry. And it is amazing how there were a few folks from that day who got a little insight as to who this unknown God was. Today, we who are living in 2013, we have such an awesome opportunity to come face to face with our God, with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He walked amongst us, he lived amongst us, and we can feel his presence every day. And so, listener, I hope that I have helped you to understand a little bit of the Godhead. He is whatever makes God, God. That's the Godhead. That's the best way. That's my way of understanding it. Whatever he is, that's God. That's the Godhead. And all of that is in Jesus Christ, making Jesus the one true God. So until next week, when we introduce to you a brand new series entitled Faith, the importance of faith. Think about it. And I'm inviting you to join us next week as we open the series, The Importance of Faith. Until then, I am H.G. Ferguson, reminding you to love your neighbors as yourselves and have a very, very good day. God bless you.
Inspiration 107.9 FM, your worship leader.
Christ, you know me love ya. There's no one else above ya. My God is awesome. He can move mountains. Good morning. I had a good night's sleep and did
Start your morning off right with the sweat. We're just talking about Kashmir. Cassick and Jamal is on your radio.
That's right. Inspiration 107.9 FM. Cassick and Jamal is indeed on your radio, and it's all about the blast off, the takeoff. Hey, in our 11 o'clock time schedule. Hey, listen, you just heard the program Apostolic Hour. I hope you enjoyed that one. It was always a great show. Comes your way each and every Thursday at 11 a.m. And, of course, right before that, you heard the program Message of Hope, which comes your way at 10:30 each and every Thursday. So make sure to stick around. Hey, the program Tuning Into Destiny is coming your way at 12:05. Yeah, that's going to be a great show. Newest shows, and it's been a great show every week that has been on the radio. And shortly after that, at about 12:20, we're going to get hot in the Praise Break Hour. All right, in the Praise Break Hour, hey, it's all about you, the listeners, calling in and testifying, bragging on the goodness of the Lord. And you want to call in that hour, you want to send a shout out to somebody, you want to brag on them for what they've been doing in their lives, congratulations, wedding, anniversary, you know, any kind of stuff like that. Call me up at 12 o'clock, and we're going to praise break. We're going to praise him. We got some great praise music that's lined up. It's going to get your feet moving, going to get you shaking and hustling and bustling. It's going to be a great time. All right, but don't forget, in this hour, we have your Bible scripture, your devotional of the morning that's coming your way in just a bit. So you want to make sure, hang around, and keep it locked for that. And, of course, your first look at the weather coming your way in just a bit. All right, don't forget, news, highlights, and weather comes your way at 12 noon. And don't forget, we are your #1 news leader. We knocked down the rest. This ain't nothing, buddy, better than Saturn ass. So make sure you keep it exactly where you've got it. Brand new music coming in. Jonathan McReynolds talking about no gray. You can only be white or black. You got to choose a side. You can't just be on both sides. All right, great music lives here. Inspiration 107.9 FM. Make sure you don't touch that dial.
Dr. Daniel Johnson, and you see how we do this on television, but we're both from Dumfries, so we can do this.
Amen.
Minister Johnson, impressive showing here today with the young people. Spirited message you gave them, and of course the Governor General as well, the Junior Governor General. You want to do something else this morning.
Absolutely. Mr. Newbold, we're very proud of these young people today. We talked about during the 40th anniversary of independence how proud we are to be Bahamian. But I wanted to do something specifically for young people in the country. And we're very proud of what they enacted today. This is something that they did themselves, for themselves, to demonstrate to the rest of the country they understand the process, they see the power of ritual, they want to be involved, and they have an abiding love for what we are about as a country. And I think they showed it perfectly.
And of course, as you said, we keep talking about the bad young people, but we talk about them because they haven't met this group as yet.
Well, you get some on that side of Bank Lane, and I want to show them today a crew on this side of Bank Lane.
Good show. Now, you're going to do a presentation.
Absolutely. What I want to recommend to people in the Bahamas is that as we take this journey to 40 years, we remember our partners, a lot of people who come and who love this place and the great things we are doing. One of the things we have been doing for a long time is these summer camps, and today many of my camps will culminate. We have multimedia, art and craft, social skills, but one of the great things that I encountered in the ministry this year, and we did a partnership with the Jeff Rogers basketball camp, who's been doing great things for 26 years. But we have a special guest with us today who came with a group with some people from Chicago, some from San Francisco. The Commissioner of Parks and Recreation is here. I know she doesn't want me to point her out, but I already have. But Mr. Byron Scott, who played with the great Michael Sweetbells Thompson on the famous Lakers team. They won a few championships together. And he has quietly come and been in the Bahamas with us for 25 years, conducting youth work up and down through this country for 25 years. And today I wanted to also honor him, congratulate him and his team, Jeff Rogers, and the work that they have done for this period of time to be consistent in a place like this, to show their love and gratitude. We want to return that to them, and I want to publicly commend him for what he has done and give him a token of our appreciation on this day.
And so kudos to Jeff Rogers, who, as the minister pointed out, has been staging his camp for some 26 years. That may get him a slot on Legends. We have to think about it. And of course, as a good Laker, Byron Scott, he has been helping Jeff and has been one of the staples of that camp for many years. So I'm invite both of you, Jeff and Byron, to come on over here and let the minister do what he's going to do for you. And certainly on behalf of the Bahamian people, let me say thank you as well.
Absolutely. To Byron and Mr. Jeff Rogers, as a token of our appreciation as a country, as a great sporting nation, of fantastic basketball players, track athletes. We have songwriters, musicians. We have the most Rhodes Scholars per capita in the world. I tell you today that you are in the greatest country on earth. And I know you feel it. We're happy that you're here with us, and we applaud you. God bless you for the work you continue to do with Bahamian young people, sir. If you'd have a word.
Well, first of all, Dr. Johnson, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to come to the Bahamas for the past 25 years amongst all these beautiful people. And it is, I agree with you, the best country in the world. I enjoy coming here. I consider myself a Bahamian, so to speak. This is my second home, and meeting Jeff Rogers 26 years ago and getting involved with his basketball camp is one of the best things I've ever done in my life. To be able to try to give a little bit of the wisdom that I've learned over the years to some of these young people that are coming up, not only for basketball, but from an educational standpoint, has been a blessing for me. So I want to just thank you guys for inviting me into your home and allowing me to be a part of your lives for the past 25 years, and I really appreciate it. And I just want to say God bless you, and thank you again for your hospitality over the years. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And before we let all of you go, we want to say thank you, Jeff Rogers, for laboring in the vineyard for so many years.
Well, you know, I first want to thank God for sparing my life once again to have this opportunity to work with our young boys and girls. It's always a joy and a pleasure to work with young people. And again, like everybody, I want to thank Mr. Byron Scott, you know, for making a sacrifice every year for the past 25 years to put his busy schedule aside to just come to Nassau and spend some time with our youth. So I'm grateful to you, Byron, and I want to thank the minister who stepped on board for the past 2 years to support this camp 100%, and I'm grateful for the support I've been getting from the Bahamian people and also the governor of the Bahamas.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you very much, Byron, and thank all of you as well. And the Director of Youth is going to talk about the Junior Governor General, who says we've got to establish a youth council and we want a youth policy. You want to talk some more about some of that?
Yes, well, we are very excited. Last October, a group of young people were able to present a draft national youth policy to the Honorable Minister for his review. This group has already been in the process of looking and reviewing the draft policy. looking at some creative programs that we can implement in this country that are for young people, making certain that we put young people to the mainstream in areas of education, in areas of industry, employment, and also in areas of policy. There are a lot of policies around this country that exist in government, but there's no national youth policy. And so my minister will be very bold this year to take a national youth policy or a draft policy to the cabinet and soon enough to the House of Assembly. And today you will see these individuals discussing some elements of the policy and their understanding of it and how we can further that policy initiative.
Thank you very much, Director of Youth Darren Turnquest, Minister Danny Johnson, Jeff Rogers, and of course Byron Scott, the good Laker Regan. Let you listen to the young people who are in the 2013 version of Youth Parliament. Let's join them.
Mr. Speaker, looking at the past 40 years, the Bahamians have much to be proud of. In every sphere of society, we have reached benchmarks and won world acclaim in areas such as the arts, music, with the likes of Mr. Ronnie Butler and the Bahamas Men, in sports, with the likes of the Golden Girls, the Golden Knights, Tonique Williams-Darling, Frank Rutherford, and Thomas A. Robertson, just to name a few. In film, with the likes of Sir Sidney Poitier and the multi-talented Mr. Rick Fox. Also in education, in literature, and theology. As a small nation in which we are one of the world's most sought-after motivational speakers and best-selling author in that of Dr. Miles Monroe. Mr. Speaker, with all that being said, we have had and we continue to have our share of challenges. At present, we have a sluggish and fragile economy, one that is based primarily on tourism. While this industry has been our bread and butter, pardon the vernacular, I personally believe that with the rapid advancements in areas of technology, medicine, music, and media, that it leads to the conclusion that we too in the Bahamas have to make some difficult and drastic decisions in the very near future. Mr. Speaker, given the present state of our educational system, which has been one of the top in our region and in the wider world through our rapid development over the past 40 years, has steadily declined. According to the Department of Statistics, the current national grade on our BJC is a C-, and on our BGCSE is a D+. Mr. Speaker, I must ask, as the journey continues, where is the Bahamas headed? At once, this was a hallmark for Bahamian success, which stimulated social and economic strength, but it no longer reigns as a national symbol of pride. Mr. Speaker, I must say that many of our youth live in hostile environments that is very difficult to learn in. We must take into consideration the communities and whom some children live in. According to the Department of Statistics, 71% of men in prison are between the ages of 18 and 35. This is combined with the fact that 1 out of every 7 students, they either get expelled, they drop out of school, or a young woman become pregnant before they even graduate. Mr. Speaker, this is also accompanied by the overcrowding of our classrooms and the lack of sufficient teachers for specific subjects, in particular in Abaco. Mr. Speaker, I submit to you, if we are to move this country of ours into an upward trajectory, it is imperative that as the journey continues, that we, the youth of this nation, are kept informed, involved, and engaged as to what is taking place in and around our respective societies. Clearly, there seems to be a generational gap that exists in our country that needs to be mended by bold and direct initiatives that will tackle the ailing and vexing problems that we face on a daily basis concerning our youth. Mr. Speaker, one of those initiatives is the National Youth Policy. Through the implementation of this policy, many of our respective youth will be able to truly experience what it is to be a Bahamian citizen. In addition, we Bahamians must recognize our young people as our greatest human asset. Mr. Speaker, this is the reason why programs such as the National Youth Commission, the National Youth Development Trust, the National Center for Youth Development and Trust cannot and should not be understated to the degree that we waste too much valuable time and resources. For in order for us to change this nation, we must first of all change this generation. Mr. Speaker, there is a 2,000-pound gorilla in our midst, and that of illegal immigration. As sensitive as a subject as this may be for most, Mr. Speaker, we cannot afford to ignore this monster any longer. We have to confront this, and we have to do it now before it's too late. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, the problem affects every area of our society. It affects our educational, our fiscal, our medical, our psychological, our social, and our economical societies. Mr. Speaker, in the 21st century, globalization has prompted many countries to confront illegal immigration for social, economic, and safety reasons. Public opinion about illegal immigration waxes and wanes with economic conditions, cultural beliefs, and shifting demographics. But when it comes to public policy, the experts often agree on a few guiding principles. Mr. Speaker, channels for illegal immigration should be streamlined and improved. Immigration authorities should practice improved oversight on their agencies. Illegal immigrants should be enticed out of their extra-legal status, and border control should operate under a sense of mutual responsibility and shared benefit. Whether these compelling goals will ever reach fruition, however, remains a persistent question. Mr. Speaker, from vibrant neighborhoods to violent street gangs, illegal immigration plays a dynamic but controversial role in the Bahamas. Indeed, this movement of humanity prompts worries about the economy, our families, and our national security. Mr. Speaker, serious responses to the challenges of illegal immigration requires a sort of innovative diplomacy, which is usually in short supply. Mr. Speaker, every illegal immigrant should play by Bahamian rules to become a naturalized citizen of the Bahamas. There are a number of requirements that must be met. Firstly, the lawful entry as a permanent resident. They should be a resident in the Bahamas for at least 3 years to filing a petition for naturalization, including their spouse. They must have physical presence in the Bahamas for at least the period of their residence. They should be able to read, write, and speak good English. And lastly, they should have knowledge of Bahamian history and have an understanding of the fundamentals of the Bahamian government. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I have a simple but yet complex question to ask. If we are to succeed in building the bridge to the future, what are you, the youth of this country, willing to do to continue building on the historic efforts that our forefathers have laid on? Mr. Speaker, we, the youth of this nation, call upon this present government, and without delay, to make it mandatory in the establishment of the National Bahamian Civics Curriculum, in the preservation, in the education, and in the accurate documentation of our national heroes and every contribution that they would have made to this country. Mr. Speaker, it is very important that we do not forget under what premise this nation was formed. And more importantly, we must not stray away from what our forefathers had originally intended, which is the providential hand of God over this nation, and to remember to put God first, front, and center in all that we do. We must collectively as a nation bring back the fear of God in our lives. For as in the Bible says, blessed is the nation in whose God is the Lord. We must continue to move forward, upward, onward, and together as one nation united in love and in service.
Thank you. Honorable Member for North Abaco, thank you very much for your contribution to this resolution. Is there a seconder? Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Montague.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion. As we, the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, acknowledge the advancements made since we commenced our journey 40 years ago, we must also recognize that which must be improved in order for us to continue. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we must recognize the youth as our bridge to the future, investing in them so that we build our future upon stable and secure ground as we continue our journey. Mr. Speaker, my contributions are on behalf of the people of Montague, who have so graciously allowed me to represent them in this great house. As a nation, we have embarked upon a journey set about by our forebears years ago. This journey has brought us out of the shadow of the British colony we once were into the spotlight of our radiating Bahamian sun. Having started with the power of the minority, we have embarked upon a journey which has since led to the rule of us, the majority. We have collectively taken the path that has since clarified the air, once polluted with the miasma of slavery and oppression, now ornate with the fumes of independence. However, Mr. Speaker, we as a people must recognize that it does not stop here. The journey continues. As a relatively young nation within the Western Hemisphere, it is imperative, Mr. Speaker, that we recognize our youth as the foundation for the future, and we teach them the civic values that have brought us through 40 years of independence, if we are to suitably bridge the way to a prosperous future. Civic education is the cultivation of the virtues, knowledge, and skills necessary for political participation, as described by Dr. Amy Goochman, President of the University of Pennsylvania. Thus, as the Sagmore Institute puts it, civics education seeks to develop within a citizenry a felt connection to the country or society and its values. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we understand the democratic morals and principles that shaped our country and led to the celebration of 40 years as an independent nation. I further quote, civic education strives to educate the youth to be civic-minded, that is to think and care for the general welfare of the community, and to develop leaders that demonstrate the character and values that shaped our democratic society. This would seek to foster the heartfelt connection between a country and its citizens, striving to teach them the relationship between this country and the values that we hold core to being a Bahamian. Civics allows us as young people to appreciate an imperative part of what it means to be a Bahamian, teaching us our rights and responsibilities as citizens of our nation, instilling in us a strong sense of national pride. By engaging in civic curricula, we begin to develop morals and ethical values that infuse into the melting pot of characteristics that attribute to who we are as individuals and as Bahamians. Not only do we develop an appreciation for who we are as the youth of the nation, but we gain the knowledge of how our country operates, ultimately allowing us to contribute in the best way possible to the advancement of our country. I would be doing a great injustice to the myriad of detail required to fully outline a civics curricula within the time restraints given. And for that reason, I've chosen to focus on 3 aspects that I believe to be most imperative. Mr. Speaker, my contributions are based on my research of the local government junior council civics education curriculum presently being taught in the Family Island, and from the iCivics.org curriculum founded by former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. 1. Citizenship and the Constitution, in which citizens will learn what it means to be a Bahamian citizen, including one's rights and responsibilities, and this Constitution's role in protecting citizens' rights. That is to say, Mr. Speaker, that being a Bahamian is not being all flash and no substance, as Z. Edgell puts it. It is not gyrating vulgarly, and it is not, Mr. Speaker, being loud and dogmatic. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the government, its structure, the basic functions of the 3 branches, the separation of power between them, and the tenets of our political system. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the budget, where the government obtains its revenue, how the government uses the budget for the betterment of its citizens, and the principles and processes of budgeting. With the knowledge obtained of those civics topics, both mentioned and unmentioned, I firmly believe that as the youth of the nation, we will be well on our way to becoming more civic-minded and the best building blocks for the bridge to the future. I believe, however, that the traditional textbook teaching that is currently employed in many school systems will not suffice in regards to teaching civics. Research conducted by Joanne Garfield, a professor of educational psychology at the University of Minnesota, reveals that students learn better if they are engaged in their own learning. Thus, Mr. Speaker, it is not enough to simply be taught physics by means of reading, lectures, and worksheets. We must be taught civics in an engaging way if students are to retain the information and ultimately become civic-minded citizens. Thus, for those visual learners, presentations by peers and informative movies and dramatic works can make the learning process both engaging and informative. For those auditory learners, podcasts may be prepared by students and shared, concomitantly teaching oneself and one's peers. Finally, Mr. Speaker, for those kinesthetic or tactile learners who learn best when their hands and bodies are involved in their learning, therefore when they are physically in motion, simulations of important processes such as the electoral system, as well as informative role plays, would allow for a more hands-on learning experience, consequently resulting in more information being retained. Another very engaging way of learning is through means of field trips. Mr. Speaker, I can recall as a primary school student taking many trips to the House of Assembly, the National Art Gallery, and various Bahamian museums. But having taken these trips in primary school only, I remember the trip in and of itself, but not the information learned. Mr. Speaker, how can I be expected to remember what I learned in grade 3 if it was never reinforced in grade 10? In taking these trips, the learning experience became enjoyable and interesting and allowed me to recall more than what I'd learned in the classroom at the time. But if the information is never retained and reinforced, Mr. Speaker, it simply becomes a memory, as it has for me. I believe that the development of a large museum devoted to civics education in which citizens could visit would allow for not only young people, but all Bahamians to engage in civics learning as they simultaneously establish a new sense of national identity. The museum would expand upon the arrangement of portraits seen in Rawson Square. Portraits of Bahamian heroes, historic landmarks, and artifacts relating to a variety of civics-related topics would be displayed. However, Mr. Speaker, a traditional plaque giving an account for what or who is being depicted would not be the only display given. Short movies and interactive games and quizzes would also be featured, bringing the history to life. The museum would be designed in a similar fashion to the Florida Holocaust Memorial Museum and Education Center. In addition to interactive displays, important documents such as the Constitution, the Bahamas' international obligations, and the speech from the throne would be displayed, so that as we, the youth, develop into civic-minded individuals, we always have access to an abundance of civic-related information. As a participant in the Model United Nations, I believe that the academic simulation which allows young people to role-play diplomats representing a country or non-governmental organization is an excellent way to allow students to acquire civic-orientated skills. I have learned to appreciate the process of wholly understanding a concept as opposed to simply knowing the facts, which is not enough. Mr. Speaker, it stands to reason that even this simulation of parliamentary procedures in this special sitting of youth in Parliament has allowed us, as the youth of the nation, to become a bit more civic-minded, as we have been required to do extensive research, analytically think, and solve problems rationally. Mr. Speaker, we cannot be the voters of tomorrow if we do not understand the electoral process. We cannot change the Constitution if we do not know what the Constitution is. Mr. Speaker, we cannot be the bridge to the future if we do not know how to get there. Thus, Mr. Speaker, I call upon all educators and those devoted to the education system to not only teach civics, but to teach it in such a way that students are engaged, can retain the information, and ultimately be the best building blocks as we bridge to the future. Thank you, Mr.
Honorable Member for Montague, thank you very much for your contribution to this resolution. It has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas the Bahamas gained its independence on July 10th, 1973, and whereas on July 10th, 2013, the islands of the Bahamas celebrated the 40th anniversary of its independence. And whereas that date marked the anniversary of the raising of the black, gold, and aquamarine Bahamian national flag. Now therefore be it resolved that the Bahamas, while acknowledging the significant strides towards youth development over the past 40 years, recognizes that there is much work to be done through the implementation and enactment of a national youth policy for the Bahamas as the government's legally binding commitment towards youth development. That the Bahamas must recognize young people as its greatest human asset and engage them in meaningful ways at all levels of the decision-making process and protect their contributions to the implementation of legislation for a National Youth Commission, a National Youth Development Trust, a National Center for Youth Development, and that the historic contributions of our national heroes be incorporated into our education system through the implementation of a mandatory national Bahamian civics curriculum so as to make certain that the history of great Bahamian heroes and the functions of our government are never forgotten or become unknown to the next generation. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the humble, innovative persons of Grand Bahama for providing me with this most prized opportunity, representing them and the youth of this nation. Walk with me down memory lane. July 10, 1973. Thousands of persons gathered on Clifford Park to witness the Bahamas' coming of age. We all know the feeling of coming of age, Mr. Speaker. It's exciting. It's memorable. As a spectator, I imagine that the people would have been enveloped with the pride and elation to have witnessed the flag ceremony as the Union Jack was lowered and our glorious black, aquamarine, and gold flag was slowly hoisted. From that moment on, the Bahamas was declared an independent nation. In the 1940s, the average black Bahamian could not have dreamed of enjoying the same hotels or public places as their white counterparts. Bahamians could not imagine voting in a democratic election, especially women. This could not have happened, Mr. Speaker, without the hard work and determination of our national heroes. Persons like Sir Lyndon Pinling, Sir Milo Butler, Sir Randall Fox, Sir Clifford Darling, and our first female Minister of Government, former Senator Dame Doris Johnson, who made the Bahamian dream a reality. Not to mention the Bahamians who protested unfair wages in the Burma Road riots of 1942, and those taxi drivers who took a stand for 17 days in 1958. It was through their dream, Mr. Speaker, that a bridge was built for the future, which overcame obstacles of discrimination and prejudice against blacks. They fought for civil rights, labor equality, and the rights for all Bahamians. The Bahamas has accomplished much in the past 40 years. Advancements have been made in education. On every island, every child is afforded an education. Our economy has made upward strides with 5.8 million visitors flocking to our shores each year, according to Gary Young, the Ministry of Tourism's Senior Director of Research and Statistics. Additionally, the Bahamas has established itself in banking, construction, and manufacturing industries. Of course, the road to independence wasn't easy, and our brave forefathers bore the burden of fighting for equality and civil rights. However, Mr. Speaker, we cannot fully celebrate knowing that so many youth are unemployed. Department of Statistics reported 30.7%, and we wonder why the crime rate is so high. We have questioned our society's issues without searching for the right answer, which has been staring us in the face all along. If we fail to train a child, we are asking for them to be unruly. Similarly, failure to properly educate, train, and pay attention to our youth leads to disaster. solution, Mr. Speaker, is to not repeat the mistakes we made 40 years in neglecting to make our youth a priority. The best way to do this, Mr. Speaker, is to implement a national youth policy. This policy utilizes key strategic themes in order to conquer the issues facing our youth. One of these key tools, and the most important one in my opinion, is education. If some of you think education is simply expensive, try ignorance. Knowledge is power, Mr. Speaker. My hometown, Grand Bahama Island, has a College of the Bahamas campus. The young people of Grand Bahama are extremely grateful because of this, and we appreciate that we can obtain a tertiary level education on home soil. As a junior member of Parliament for Grand Bahama, it grieves me, Mr. Speaker, that while we have a newly built campus, that campus is not able to provide many young people with the courses needed to graduate without traveling to New Providence. However, had there been a national youth policy in place, the young persons of Grand Bahama would be empowered with a legally binding commitment of the government towards them, which would have enabled them to have lobbied their voices and concerns. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the students of the Family Islands are at a huge disadvantage when it comes to educational opportunities. More opportunities are afforded to New Providence students. Mr. Speaker, I understand that our nation's population is concentrated here, but it is unacceptable the way youth in the Family Islands are treated. I don't believe it is intentional, but we are tired of being overlooked. One of the strategic themes of the National Youth Policy is to include young persons in the decision-making process. A national youth policy would give the youth and the family equal opportunities to be included. We will have a voice under a national youth policy. A part of this policy's supplementary framework calls for a national center for youth development. If every island had such a center, there would be a twofold solution to our problem of being overlooked. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, the center will be able to address the key issues among the youth of each island. Furthermore, a junior director of youth would be able to lobby directly to youth stakeholders to ensure that the voices of all the youth of this nation are heard. Since we are the future leaders, we should be involved in decision-making. Mr. Speaker, we are capable of making mature decisions in order to build a bridge to the future so that the journey may continue. The youth of this nation must be involved. I appeal to the powers that be. Do not overlook the youth of this nation. Mr. Speaker, I reiterate that 40 years ago, our forefathers sweat blood and shed tears for us to be here today. The Bahamas has come far, but has made a crucial mistake in ignoring our youth, especially those in the Family Islands. Our national youth policy is here. We just need to use it. My colleagues and I are gathered here today because we are the future leaders. And 40 years from now, Mr. Speaker, when we celebrate another milestone, the name of yours truly, Tashira Adams, will be among our nation's heroes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama, thank you very much for your contribution. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Isles.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the jubilant constituents of Golden Isles, and I thank them for this chance to sit in this House and be their voice. The resolution today is concerned with youth development through policies. My learned colleague has touched bases on the National Youth Policy itself, which has been floating around for 20+ years now. I thank the honorable members for that, for making the case. With that said, I now give my contribution to the resolution. That the historic contributions of our national heroes be incorporated into our education system through the implementation of a mandatory national Bahamian civics curriculum so as to make sure that the history of great Bahamian heroes are never forgotten or become unknown to the next generation. Mr. Speaker, in this respect, it is my view that civics in the Bahamas is very limited to our youth. And I make this statement mainly because it is not mandatory in all our schools, nor has it been introduced to all government schools. The focus was turned from the Bahamian history, Bahamian culture, and it was expanded to the Caribbean and America's distant past. We do not need to go in depth with America's distant past when the Bahamian story is immense enough. Mr. Speaker, there's a series on Cable 12 called My 5 Cents, and there they questioned the students, the children, in a special segment pertaining to the great leaders of our nation. And the question was asked, who is the Governor General of the Bahamas? And one child said, the Honorable Hubert Alexander Ingram. The show went on, and more examples evidence the fact that many of young people do not know about their leaders of their own country. What will our future be if we don't know where we came from? What happened to September 1973? That's when it should have been in effect. Why civics is not mandatory in all the schools from hence the beginning. 40 years, Mr. Speaker, and the majority of our students are not educated about this country's past and present legacy. As much as the government has changed over the past 40 years, it has taken successive government this long to decide upon putting civics in all our schools and making it mandatory, instead of having it as a choice. Which brings me to my first point. Mr. Speaker, with civics as a choice in the matter next to a subject like dimensions of wellness, I would choose dimensions of wellness over civics, mainly because I don't know about civics. Dimensions of wellness is an easy A, and I have a choice in the matter. There are some aspects of the learning that should be fundamental, and they should not be taught or learned by choice, Mr. Speaker. But as a matter of right and necessity, a subject area about our rights as Bahamians and the laws of our country should not, or even why we are celebrating 40 years of independence today, Mr. Speaker, should not be a choice. The second issue at hand today, Mr. Speaker, is that the present curriculum is old and outdated. Mr. Speaker, my research led me to the Ministry of Education's civic curriculum from July 1996, a year after I was born. A review of this booklet disclosed some interesting topics that really could grasp the attention of many students around this nation. It had me intrigued, and I thought that it was not all that bad. With a little updating and reviewing, this subject area could play a significant role in the raising of awareness and consciousness of young people by revealing to them where we really came from. I researched further and came across another civics curriculum that was drafted in August of 2010 by the local government junior council program in the Family Islands. This draft sought to create a unique and a curriculum on civics specifically designed for Family Islanders. It incorporated facts about the local Family Island leaders, growth in local community, and how local government works. This too was an excellent impressive piece of material that could be spread across this land called the Bahamas and tailored for each island, Mr. Speaker. A comparison of both documents showed that the 1996 curriculum stated the topic, then it listed its one-line objective of the topic. But after reviewing the local government junior council's program, civics curriculum, it gave me a good description of the course itself. Then it goes on and gave me a line of objective of what the topic would be like, and then it gives me a brief description of each topic. One was able to comprehend by just reading one of the topic descriptions on what to expect from the topic. Mr. Speaker, the solution is simple. Without throwing the 1996 version of the civics curriculum out the window, we can gather a representative from each family island and one from the province and sit them down at the table with the minister and pull topics from both the old and newer version of the curriculum and form one single curriculum for civics. There is no better way of building the bridge and continuing the journey. Yes, our country is small, but we have a powerful, strong voice. Look at what we did. We've gained our independence from a country that was once ago the most powerful country in the world, Britain. But I was not educated on what the late Sir Lyndon Pinland and his team did to free us from Britain's rule. What was the full story of Pinland's fight for us to celebrate 40 years? It's about time we take the depth of our feet out of the United States and plant them firmly into the Bahamas and release the information to us, the people. Mr. Speaker, along with the civics curriculum, it could be followed up by the implementation of a civic bee. Put the minds of our students to the test. This is a remarkable way for them to retain information and conduct research about our country's past and present leaders. I understand the Ministry of Education Special Services Department has numerous programs in place to help with the development of the youth critical thinking skills and competency levels, and they are effective, Mr. Speaker. Such programs are the National Debate Series and the Extended Learning Program, just to name a few. So I believe that a civic bee will be successful and effective. As I take my seat, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that we have failed as a nation when it comes to civic curriculum being strongly stressed in all our schools. There's a famous quote by Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company, stated, and I quote, "Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently," end quote. Yes, we have been blind for 40 years, Mr. Speaker. But let's start over by limiting American aspects and making our Bahamian aspects limitless to our students. And let us progress forward, keep looking upward, pressing onward, and we will unite together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Golden Isles, thank you very much for your contribution. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Centerville.
Mr. Speaker, no country, absolutely no country, on its road to development will get there without engaging us, the young people. We are the answers to all of the solutions. Therefore, it is my privilege today to stand here and represent the humble citizens of Centerville. I thank them for giving me this opportunity to represent them in this great house as we reflect on the 40 years of our independence as this journey continues. My fellow parliamentarians and I agree that we must implement a national youth policy, a policy that will redirect this country's focus while engaging, empowering, and enabling us, the youths, in areas that are affecting us socially, economically, and politically. Mr. Speaker, the 6 Commonwealth Youth Ministers' meeting strategy papers defines young people's participation in decision-making process as a structure that promotes both our development and the development of our societies. Youth involvement in decision-making is whenever a major decision is being made by the government or communities, a young individual is there to contribute to that decision. Mr. Speaker, I ask, why not get us youths involved? Listen, youthpolicy.org revealed that 50% of the countries around the world have a current youth policy. Many of them engage youth in everything that they do. Many of the countries have at least one youth in councils and on committees so that they cannot forget the young people when they're making their decisions. Upon seeking to implement such a policy, our country, as it has done with other laws and policies, can view these countries as role models and make their laws and policies unique to the Bahamas to service our needs and our culture. Mr. Speaker, of the several youths that I polled, 90% supported the idea of a PEP, a pay enhancement program that will help to encourage us young people to unite as one for the betterment of this society. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine a young individual like me or any of my fellow parliamentarians mentoring a disturbed youth, telling him to get off the streets, turn in his weapon, and avoid any other altercation? Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, the change it will bring to society? Mr. Speaker, that is how we are going to build this bridge that leads to the future, helping and involving each individual one at a time, giving us young people the chance to voice our opinion and make decisions in this country. According to pairnet.bc, there are benefits in involving young people in making decisions, such as engaging young people encourages us to become more active community members. Young people are given the opportunity to gain leadership and gain skills and practical experience, leading to a more effective decision-making in the future. society can gain a better understanding of us, the youth, a fresh perspective, a bridge to another youth, enthusiasm, creativity, flexibility, and proactiveness. Mr. Speaker, why can't we get a chance? Why can't we have a chance to prove that all isn't lost in this country? Why can't you give us a chance to prove that we can rebuild this Bahamian dream that others say are empty and lost? Give us young people a chance, Mr. Speaker. We can make this country the best little country in the world. Mr. Speaker, we are inspired and motivated to make a change and build that bridge that leads to the future. Mr. Speaker, we also are tired of being isolated by society. We want our voices to be heard and society to listen. Things must change, Mr. Speaker, for the betterment of this country and the betterment of society. I urge the people who are the policy makers, the government, and the society to take us young people seriously for once, as we fight for our rights as young Bahamians in this country and push for this national youth policy. We need it and we want it. Mr. Speaker, we are tired of being told that we are the future or we are the future leaders. We need proof, and we need that proof now. We need a national youth policy as that proof. Enough of pointing fingers and blaming each other, finding excuses and not the solutions. Let us put in a hand and help in any and every way that we can to make this awesome journey continue, staying united as one in peace, love, and unity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Centerville, thank you very much for your contribution. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the courageous people of Bamboo Town and thank them for giving me the opportunity to sit in this honorable house. When the theme, the bridge to the future, the journey continues, is repeated, my mind journeys back to documents I have read or stories I have heard about the Bahamas on the 10th of July, 1973, when we made a significant achievement. We were deemed an independent nation. It was when our forefathers, such as Lyndon Pinlin, who fought for equality, and Samila Butler, who worked in the trenches agitating for majority rule. At that time, our forefathers were the bridge, and they aided the country to be where it is today. It is said that the purpose of a bridge is to provide passage over an obstacle. As young Bahamians, we could provide passage for our country over a major obstacle, and that obstacle is the lack of civic knowledge. We are the bridge. Mr. Speaker, there are three things that troubles me as a proud young Bahamian. Firstly, why is civic not suggested to the private schools to become mandatory in their high school curriculum? Shouldn't we all know who we are as Bahamians? Secondly, why aren't there well-developed civic programs established in the educational system? Thirdly, why, oh why, is there a lack of civic-related advertisements? Point one, Mr. Speaker. Did you know that as of September 2013, the civic subject will be implemented in every public high school curriculum? Marvelous idea, I must say. But what about the private schools? I clearly understand that the government don't have direct input or make any decision on all the private sectors, but can it at least be a suggestion to give all Bahamian high school students an opportunity to feel what I'm feeling, a sense of pride, and to give them the opportunity to see where we came from, to appreciate where we are now, and to understand where we are going? Can the representatives from the private and government educational school meet as one body and reveal and explain to them the importance of young Bahamian high school students understanding their past, embracing their present, and marching on to their future? I can assure you that the implementation of the civic subject in all schools can achieve this goal. Awesome thought, isn't it? Point two, Mr. Speaker. Research has revealed that not one school, government nor private, runs a continuous civic program, not even once a year. We have well-developed programs such as Junior Achievement, also known as JA, and the Governor General Youth Award, also known as GGYA. Why can't there be a CIVIC program that's well-developed, where young Bahamians are given incentives just like the other programs, where we can host civic fairs displaying our country's history, have reenactments to show the struggles that we've overcome, disclose untold history, and learn about our rich country. The third porch is a column published in the Nassau Guardian's newspaper of a young Bahamian expressing his thought. That's a good start. Nicolette Bethel said, and I quote, "Greatness occurs when people stand on the shoulder of giants. But we have removed our giants from the reach of our youth, and the carelessness of our history has given them nothing but dust on which to stand," end quote. Mr. Speaker, this brings me to my third and final point. Think outside the box here with me. Civics can be considered formal and informal. Education is not only restricted to the four walls of a school, but it is all around us in our everyday life. And the key to embedding civics into the minds of young people is through advertisement. The computer, the phones, the radio, the television, media itself is a part of our everyday living. For instance, our parliamentary channel can be used as a full-time informative platform to educate the young and the not-so-young. When we watch the U.S. channels during their Black History Month, I sometimes forget that I'm a Bahamian simply because the media is saturated with their history. Let us do the same. Let us give the young people no other choice but to want to be proud Bahamians. The benefits of teaching civic in all schools and creating programs to promote civic will then open up the minds of young people to then enable us to see where our forefathers has brought us from and to motivate us to steer the country where it needs to go. Our forefathers have laid the foundation. Now what do we do with it? If we are knowledgeable about our past, then we'll be able to plan our future because we would know where we came from and would then know where we should be going. It would give us like a sense of direction, you know? James Baldwin said, and I quote, "Know from whence you came. If you know from whence you came, there are absolutely no limitations on where you can go," end quote. The courageous constituents of Bamboo Town say to you, keep on building. Reinforce what pillars were laid. Smooth out whatever bumps may have occurred along the way. Pave and widen new streets, and watch this rich country grow until we see our children, grandchildren, and possibly great-grandchildren continue the bridge into the future. I encourage you, the youth of this Bahama land, to be the bridge into the future so that this nation can stand and continue the journey moving forward, upward, onward, and together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Bamboo Town, thank you very much for your contribution, as many. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for North Andros.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My fellow parliamentarians, the great constituents of North Andros and the Berry Islands have entrusted me with the responsibility of representing them in this special sitting of Parliament. Hence, I express my gratitude to them. Mr. Speaker, the theme, the bridge to the future, the journey continues, is indeed a most fitting one as we commemorate the 40th anniversary of our country's independence. I must convey congratulations to our country's leaders who, according to the Nassau Guardian news editor, have ensured the healthy growth of our GDP for 40 years. The development of institutions such as national insurance and the College of the Bahamas, just to name two, and the evolution of the Bahamas as a sporting power. As a matter of fact, I stand as a proud Androsian from amongst the men who will, after 13 years, receive a bronze medal in the 4x400 meter is Mr. Carl Oliver Jr., a native of Mastic Point. Where success is, one will always find a member of my constituency. It is the success of Mr. Carl Oliver, Mr. Joseph Spence, and Bishop Drexel Wellington Gomez that young people know very little about. Hence, when questions are raised on catching gap seed, the public is embarrassed, especially educators, when students and some from the College of the Bahamas give inaccurate responses. While some laugh, I am appalled, for I conclude that we have failed to, and I quote, tell and retell our stories to a new generation of Bahamians, as mandated by Mr. Charles Carter, co-chair of the National Independence Committee. It is clear then, we need to retrace the past, retrieve core values, re-strategize, and restore with the view to continue the journey. According to Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Perry Christie, the theme indicates that we are crossing over from one era to another. But the question I ask is, how do we cross over? Tracy A.D. Meyer states that knowledge of where we came from yesterday, where we are today, to know where we are going tomorrow is critical. And Sir Arthur Folkes is of the view that it is in the past that we, and I quote, find the roots of civility, respect, and good manners. Core values are retrieved as we share the struggles that led to women voting for the first time in 1962, to majority rule in 1967, independence in 1973, and the success of all our athletes. Mr. Speaker, education therefore plays a pivotal role in this retracing process, for in the ministry's hand is the fate of those who will continue the journey. Is there really a need for education to implement a national Bahamian civics curriculum when the information, Mr. Speaker, about our national heroes is available in our textbooks? Mr. Speaker, the recent effort by the government to draw students' attention to majority rule and Patrons' Day by mandating that schools stop and celebrate those days was more meaningful to me as a young person. I moved away from those 2 days convinced that we have to deliberate about what we do, almost force the hands of educators to make sure the underlying messages of national pride and what it means to be Bahamian are conveyed. Both days arm me with a sense of pride, boldness, and appreciation for struggles, women, and ways in which I can positively address issues in my community. This, Mr. Speaker, should serve as policy where all schools, 160 in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, are mandated to celebrate significant days such as these, including independence. Don't you think that the journey will continue if students are impacted, as I was? In the absence of passing a resolution to create a national Bahamian civics curriculum, we must appoint a committee to review the present content to ensure, as Sir Arthur Folkes suggests, that our story is being told accurately. Mr. Speaker, the 2010 census recorded the population of this country at 351,461, and of that, 26.8% were under the age of 15, and 44.4% were between the ages of 15 and 44. Combined, they total 71.2%. In the two groupings, we find young people under the age of 30 who will be charged with leading the Bahamas. This group must, I repeat, must be targeted to receive the baton that has been passed by Sir Lyndon Pinlin, Right Honorable Hubert Alexander Ingram, and the Right Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie. Hence, I concur that a National Center for Youth Development is in order. This will provide young people with avenues to explore opportunities, improve competencies, establish connections, determine support systems, and make significant contributions. I envision, Mr. Speaker, with the implementation of a National Center for Youth Development, Andros will be the ideal location. It is important that we reject the notion that New Providence is the Bahamas, and start to look at realistic ways in which we can downsize this overpopulated island. My constituency has the space to accommodate such a facility. For example, I can see the government renovating the North Andros Auditorium to be used by the Director of Youth to provide young people with access to technology, access to sporting facilities, access to leadership courses, access to skill-based training, access to partner with each other to spearhead community projects. This then lightens the task of the National Training Agency. Mr. Speaker, the thrust for a National Center for Youth Development will align with CARICOM's report on youth development. Mr. Speaker, time does not afford me the opportunity to elaborate any further, but I must conclude by using the proverb that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. We have taken 40, and the people of North Andros and the Berry Islands are prepared to take additional steps in this exercise of bridging the gap so that the journey continues. Is the country ready to demand a greater level of accountability from educators? Are we prepared to be deliberate about celebrating those days and people whom we deem significant in Bahamian history? Can we see the volume in establishing National Center for Youth Development in North Andros and the Berry Islands? I guarantee you that when we collectively embrace what is being tabled, Andros will no longer be called the sleeping giant, and we will be able to march on Bahamaland. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Honorable Member for North Andros, thank you very much for your contributions. You may take a seat. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise and firmly stand on behalf of the vivacious residents of the St. Anne's constituency and humbly thank them for this grand opportunity to voice their concerns in this hallowed hall. This year, 2013, not only marks 40 years of independence for our great Bahamaland, but also 40 years of this nation's commitment to the advancement of its youth. Despite this fact, Mr. Speaker, there is still a great deal of work to be done. Many individuals of the older generation are of the opinion that the youth of today are headed down the wrong path. Too often, Mr. Speaker, we hear comments made such as, "Boy, this young generation ain't no good." These statements are by no means correct. Mr. Speaker, we have young Bahamians in this country that are striving for levels of greatness never before reached in this country. Take, for example, the intelligent young people in this esteemed chamber with me. Nonetheless, some of our fellow contemporaries do need that little extra help and encouragement. The challenges that we as young people face are incredibly arduous, however, are not impossible to overcome. This, Mr. Speaker, is what I wish to discuss. If we, the young people of this land, are to become the bridge to that future, our first step in development is to overcome these challenges. There are several issues facing the youth that I wish to focus on, the first of which being substance abuse. According to a study conducted by Bahamian psychologist Dr. David Allen, over 40% of children in our schools are exposed to marijuana. This addicting drug impairs the brain, subsequently destroying educational potential. In addition, 1/3 of persons addicted to marijuana are chronically addicted. And of these chronic addicts, Mr. Speaker, 1/3 are involved in multiple crimes. Which brings me to my second point of violence and crime. This particular problem is like a cancer destroying our beloved nation. It pains me to say, Mr. Speaker, that according to statistics released by the Royal Bahamas Police Force in 2012, 547 individuals between the ages of 14 and 21 were remitted to Her Majesty's prison. I believe that that is 547 too many. We need to act swiftly to stop this madness. How can we continue this journey with almost 600 of our country's greatest assets behind bars? Where has our home training gone? According to Minister of Social Services Melanie Griffin, in the May 25th, 2012 online publication of the Bahama Journal, and I quote, more than 60% of all Bahamian children are now born out of wedlock. Regretfully, these children are left on their own to do as they wish while their single mothers seek to earn a living, end quote. The reality of the departure or complete absence of a parent can invoke feelings of hurt, anger, abandonment, and depression in children, all of which are factors which can lead to a life of crime and violence. According to Dr. Allen, these feelings are not only catalysts for children acting out, but for pushing them to search for that sense of security among gangs. The issue of children acting out due to absentee fathers is curable through the revitalization of the family structure in our society. Right here, Mr. Speaker, is where we must begin the transfiguration process. This is where the government can make that binding commitment to the youth. The government must create a program like that of Dr. David Allen. Dr. Allen conducted a project where young participants attended weekly group therapy sessions in which there was a family model. At the end of said program, participants showed significant decreases in desire for vengeance, anger towards others, and loneliness. Contrastingly, participants showed increases in self-esteem, hope, benevolence, and general satisfaction with life. So you see, Mr. Speaker, a program such as this can succeed where the institution of marriage has failed us. When it comes to the violence crisis, I propose that we get our young people more involved in constructive activities. The government currently has a program in place called 300 Connect. Mr. Speaker, this program seeks to connect the youth to organizations and service clubs which facilitate development and help to teach discipline and build character. Additionally, according to the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture's Strategic Plan 2012 to 2017, it intends to focus on creating opportunities for at-risk youth to participate in development. This is where our time and effort should go, Mr. Speaker. If we reach out to our young people and instill in them these positive values, then we are guaranteed to slow down this violence issue which plagues our country. This brings me to the solution of the final issue, that being the widespread substance abuse epidemic. Mr. Speaker, the answer lies within the preamble to our Constitution, which states that the people will have, and I quote, an abiding respect for Christian values. End quote. Our bodies are temples of the Lord and should be treated with the dignity and respect, not eradicated with illegal substances. Undoubtedly, a better understanding of these Christian values is what can bring about change. Politicians must go into their respective constituencies and speak with the priests and pastors, who in turn can make that special effort to further appeal to the youth. Once within our churches, the youth can learn to respect themselves mentally and physically. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that this project of youth development that we continue to undertake will not be complete overnight. It will take time, effort, talent, and that 5-letter word called money. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, constructing this bridge will be difficult, and it may sometimes feel like hell. But in the words of former President of the United Kingdom, Winston Churchill, if you are going through hell, keep going. May God bless you, my fellow parliamentarians, and God bless our Bahama land. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for St. Ange, thank you very much for your contribution. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Mount Moriah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, my fellow colleagues, distinguished guests, a pleasant afternoon. I stand on behalf of the youth of Mount Moriah in full support of the resolution as tabled before this Honorable House, but seek within my contribution as to why the Bahamas must regard its youth as its greatest asset. Mr. Speaker, can our young persons Are our young persons being sufficiently trained to compete at the globally competitive standards? Are our youth, specifically those who are graduating from our secondary and tertiary level institutions of learning, prepared to not only enter, but make meaningful contributions to the workforce? Mr. Speaker, as the honorable member from East Grand Bahama previously mentioned, unemployment for young persons stands at 30.7%. But what is the reason for this alarming statistic? In a report released by our Ministry of Education in 2012, the top performing high schools, public high schools in the province, only average grades of D- in national examinations, while top performing private schools only average grades of C-. On the Family Island, Abaco, D-. South Andros, Cat Island, San Salvador, Rumkey, D. Mr. Speaker, it is not hard to see a correlation between these horrifically poor examination results and the precipitously increasing rate of youth unemployment in Bahamas. The Bahamas educational system is in urgent need of reform if the Bahamas and its youth, who are not the future but the present, are to facilitate industrial development and economic expansion. As former U.S. Senator John Chaffee explained, when we expand our thinking, we expand who we are as human beings, the values and concepts we use to guide our choices. Bahamas, it is time to expand our thinking. I propose that more funding and opportunities for the creation of new industries and revitalization of neglected industries be established for our youth. An excellent example of this forward-thinking initiative has been introduced by the Campbell Shipping Company. Annually, this company holds a 3-week summer program to spark interest in the maritime field, which is a growing, profitable industry in the Bahamas. Furthermore, the Bahamas Maritime Cadet Corps, organized by the Bahamas Maritime Authority, is designed to introduce young persons between grades 10 and 12 to the maritime industry, preparing them for a profitable potential career within this vast market. So as you can see, Mr. Speaker, these young persons are being properly trained up to 4 years before they are to graduate from high school. 4 years. As soon as they have completed their tertiary level in education, they not only have relevant degrees, Mr. Speaker, but they also have a profession. They can enter and contribute to the workforce immediately. The focus of education in the Bahamas has been insular, Mr. Speaker, for a very long time. Teaching our young persons how to add and subtract, how to read and write, is all well and good, Mr. Speaker, but it is not sufficient. Similar opportunities, such as those provided by the Bahamas Maritime Authority, need to be established for our youth. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas cannot remain one-dimensional any longer. Can we feed ourselves, Mr. Speaker? Why do we rely on the United States for so many things, Mr. Speaker? As it stands, our Department of Statistics reports that agriculture represents a minuscule 2.1% of our GDP. Mr. Speaker, this means that, as indicated by the 5% leap unemployment took as per 2009 recession, the growth of the Bahamas is largely dependent on growth in America. Mr. Speaker, agricultural programs need to be assimilated into our schools so that fewer funds need to be spent importing produce from the United States. Mr. Speaker, suitable vocational training cannot just be available at BTVI, but rather students should be exposed to these various trades during secondary, even primary level education. Mr. Speaker, not everyone is going to be a straight A student, as indicated by our startlingly low national averages in the Bahamas General Certificate of Education examination. However, the message that our educational system is sending, that there is no hope for students who are not academically proficient. Mr. Speaker, our educational system is sending the message that if you are not good at math, English, biology, or chemistry, you are going to be stuck pumping gas for the rest of your life. Young persons should not have to rob and steal and kill simply because our educational system has failed them, leaving them unprepared and poorly equipped to enter the workplace and provide for themselves. This, Mr. Speaker, is why we urgently need educational reform. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas has come a long way during its 40 years of independence, but we, as a youth, represent a new generation of thinking, new ideas, new perspectives to view the world. Progress, advancement, discovery, invention. We, as a youth, must set the bar even higher, because no matter how far we have come, we must go farther. And Mr. Speaker, I will close with the final words of wisdom from a study conducted by UNESCO in 2012. $1 invested in new skills can pay back 15-fold in economic growth. The journey continues. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Honorable Member from Mount Moriah, thank you very much for your contribution. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Exuma.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I humbly accepted the opportunity to represent the exquisite inhabitants of the industrious island of Exuma to sit in this chamber this morning. Mr. Speaker, I rise to be the voice that has been overlooked and considered outcast by many just because we are out-islanders. I represent the youth who seldom have the opportunity to speak for themselves. I boldly accept this responsibility afforded me that allows Family Island youth to be equally heard, which is a bridge to the future. Mr. Speaker, when pointing out the flaws of this youth, many jump on the bandwagon of negativity. It is my hope that as you sit in this honorable house today, that you not only hear what needs to be done, but that you are driven to action. Bahamians portray strength, determination, and pride, and our forefathers taught us that anything worth having is worth working hard for. This statement is nothing but true when dealing with our young people. Mr. Speaker, the youth need to be heard and listened to, and not just heard. This generation plays and will play an integral role in where this country is going, and as we are the bridge to the future. Mr. Speaker, as the resolution states, we are the greatest human assets to the Bahamas, so treat us like it. Do not continue to treat us like inadequate, simple-minded babies. We implore you to give us a chance and allow us to prove our capabilities. You say that you are giving us a voice, yet still we speak when you say we can. You say we can express ourselves, yet we have to express them in ways you say we can. You say we can say how we feel, yet when we start to explain, we are overlooked. Mr. Speaker, it is time that we are allowed to stand up in the most respectful way to be heard. Put aside the prejudice and blind yourself from the youth in the past. Yes, it may be perceived that we on the Family Islands are inadequate and lacking exposure. However, we are not to be taken advantage of, for we too are a branch in the youth arm of our nation. We are more than capable of making a positive contribution to the youth development in our country, Mr. Speaker. We will not let the hard work of our forefathers go in vain. Our forebears, Sir Randall Fox, Sir Lyndon O. Pindling, Dame Doris Johnson, and Sir Milo Butler go in vain. It is time to give Jason Johnson, Antoinette Thompson, Angelica Martin, Wayne Roll, Bahamian youth a chance to do the same as they cross the bridge to the future. One goal of the youth policy is to foster an opportunity for youth to actively participate in defining Bahamian identity, Bahamian culture, and Bahamian values through our creative potential. One such way that this can be done is by establishing a body of youth who can voice the concerns of my fellow young Bahamians. Can you picture, Mr. Speaker, that not just once a year, but a quarterly meeting of youth in Parliament where our leaders are updated on a consistent basis of our issues, challenges, and also our accomplishments? In order for this to be achieved, we will have to become more knowledgeable of our Constitution, policies, and bills, which will require formal and informal learning. There would be a proper awareness of our culture that we would use to define ourselves. Mr. Speaker, I submit that there should be a body of youth on each island that is voted in, as opposed to one representative that is chosen and barely acknowledged. I propose that we give them the opportunity to actually be a parliamentarian, which upholds the 6th point in the 3rd part of the youth policy, where youth are actually involved in the decision-making process. This youth parliament would be the forum where bills are debated to be young parliamentarians, as opposed to the annual youth that are just in parliament, where they speak and their ideas are rarely acted upon. There is a youth parliament in Europe with 5,000 active members. There is youth parliament in the United Kingdom with 600 active members. Pakistan, Suriname, Trinidad, and Tobago, and many other countries can boast of an active youth parliament because they see how important it is to allow the youth to be heard. You would be dumbfounded at how the responses of youth would change toward the Bahamas if their voice were heard and quickly acted upon. Mr. Speaker, this would give young people such a sense of belonging and pride, which is also a part of the youth policy that speaks to identification and self-awareness. Once these youth develop their pride, they will blossom with gifts and talents that the world has not yet seen. As the resolution states, these assets will be engaged in meaningful ways. The youth will define who they are and positively express themselves. Mr. Speaker, all the youth need is love and to feel that they are cared for to birth new gifts to take the Bahamas to the next level. Mr. Speaker, as the journey continues over the bridge to the future, let us ensure that our youth feel that they are important enough to make a difference. Because if they don't feel it, they can't do it. So when the time comes, we can carry the mantle our forefathers left for us, Mr. Speaker. This will not be an easy task, neither will it happen overnight. But we need to be molded into our greatness now so that the journey on the bridge to the future can continue. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member Peg Zoma, thank you very much for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Killarney.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the great people of Killarney and thank them for the opportunity to sit in this honorable house. Furthermore, I wish to extend a special thank you to the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture for providing this opportunity this year along with their partners in the Ministry of Education. Mr. Speaker, we must be proud of this beautiful country called the Bahamas, the free and independent Bahamas. This morning, I stand before you, Mr. Speaker, as not just a young parliamentarian, but a young parliamentarian with a dream. The dream of an asset-based approach to youth development in this country. In the Bahamas Weekly, dated Tuesday, July 23, 2013, Mr. Charles Carter, the co-chairperson of the National Independence Commission, stated, "Our youth are our greatest human asset and must be engaged in meaningful ways in major decision-making," end quote. You see, Mr. Speaker, this approach fully embraces the dream of our next 40 years, where these very young people are to be labeled not as passive observers, but rather active participants in nation building. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the journey can continue with us. This asset-based approach is regarded as a key pillar in the development of youth and a best practice when considering the standards of the Commonwealth Youth Program, a program established in 1973 which empowers the youth of Commonwealth nations all over the world. The approach of a country viewing its young people as assets allows for that country to build on their capacity as young people and allows youth service agencies to overcome poverty, unemployment, and other ills that are evident even now as we celebrate our 40th independence. Tennyson Joseph, professor at UWI in Barbados, said it best. You must, in the formulation of any policy agenda or government agenda, build on the strengths of our youth, rather than focus on their ills associated with their presence among us. Mr. Speaker, I have the awesome task of being a Bahamian youth interested in giving solutions. There are a plethora of opportunities for the youth in our country to make a difference and be the solution for so many of our problems. Our youth can be the catalyst for change in the following areas: marine conservation, the hunger crisis, and even tourism. You see, Mr. Speaker, the discussions of these aforementioned issues are often ignored, but, Mr. Speaker, they are vital to sustaining who we are as a people. Mr. Speaker, I am speaking about environmental awareness inclusive of cultural awareness, and more importantly, redefining what it means to be a Bahamian through asset-based youth development. With the asset-based approach to youth development, a national youth corps must be established, focusing on the following areas: the environment, agriculture, tourism, and development. It is imperative that opportunities be entrusted to the youth within a structured and strategically focused corps that will facilitate civic involvement, career training and advancement, and even provide scholarships for those who wish to continue on a professional level. As the honorable member from Mount Moriah stated, agriculture accounts for a paltry 2.1% of the GDP. Moving forward, this must be increased. Mr. Speaker, it is my intention today to outline how many of the key elements in today's resolution and the issues we face in this country are no stranger to the world. Today, we must think globally and act locally. But not only think globally, but recognize the global initiatives that will facilitate regional solutions with a national impact. In review of the Commonwealth Plan of Action for Youth Empowerment, all Commonwealth countries are called to act upon Millennium Goals that will help make this Commonwealth a better place. Goals which have a target completion date of 2015. 3 of these goals are not only important to my constituents, not only related to the youth affairs that I outlined earlier, but, Mr. Speaker, directly affect every individual in this country. If I might beg your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, 3 of the youth affairs and Millennium Development Goals that are directly related are as follows. Firstly, eradicating extreme poverty and hunger. According to Hands for Hunger, 30,000 Bahamians face chronic food insecurity, Mr. Speaker. That's 10% of our population. Furthermore, as the honorable member of Mount Moriah touched upon, Hands for Hunger statistics show that 95% of our food in this country is imported. That in itself is a crime against the land. Secondly, ensuring environmental sustainability. We are challenged with a people who have little conscience when it comes to environmental and sustainable development. And finally, developing a global and national partnership for development. As of 2013, there are over 300 organizations registered under the ministry, many of whom are undersubscribed because people fail to enroll their children in volunteer opportunities. If we apply our knowledge in purposeful ways, Mr. Speaker, we can be just as bright as the best in the world. As the Minister of Youth for this country states, we must be given the access to be great. Now, Mr. Speaker, allow me to introduce the plan for the future. Not Urban Renewal 3.0, but the Millennium Changers Project, with the promise of establishment of focused youth corps in environmental sustainability, agriculture, tourism, and development. If 20,000 persons were involved in these objectives, dedicated and proud persons, imagine the difference. Now that's change you can believe in. Mr. Speaker, I have endeavored in my short time here this afternoon to stimulate the youth of our great nation, thus enabling themselves to identify, enjoy, embrace, and boast about who they are as Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, we, all of us, intend to be the bridge to the future. We, the empowered youth of this great nation called the Bahamas, will continue the journey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Kalani, thank you very much for your contribution. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for being in Grantstown.
Speaker, I'll be brief to the point. Sir Stafford Sands, Sir Clifford Darling, Thomas A. Robinson. Mr. Speaker, fellow youth parliamentarians, I rise on behalf of the realest and most down-to-earth people of the great constituency of Bean and Grantstown. Mr. Speaker, permit me to get down to business. We often talk about a bridge to the future with a journey continuing. But, Mr. Speaker, fellow youth parliamentarians, I dare to say this morning that you, me, the next generation, and all generations to come, we are the bridge, and this is the future. Our journey must now continue. Mr. Speaker, I am reminded of the words by Mr. Lewis Carroll. If you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there. I find this, Mr. Speaker, to be very interesting, because in order for us to know where we are going, we must first analyze from whence we have come from. It is saddened to say that many young people, and by extensions, adults, know not of the bridge from whence we have came, and who have gotten us to where we are now. But, Mr. Speaker, there is still hope. Hope through the implementation of a mandatory civics curriculum in our education system. This is to ensure that names like Sir Stafford Sands, Sir Kendall G. L. Isaac, Sir Clifford Darling, Thomas Augustus Robinson, Kendall G. L. Isaac, Dean Dr. Ivory Dumont, Reverend Angela Palacios, Cynthia Mother Pratt, and Mabel Walker are never forgotten or become unknown to the next generation. Mr. Speaker, some unlearned Bahamians may argue that these persons are of no significance or importance to the Bahamian society. But on behalf of the constituents of Bean and Grantstown, Mr. Speaker, we beg to differ. Sir Stafford Sands, the father of tourism in the Bahamas, in 1950, he revived the Tourism Development Board and gave it a budget of $500,000 for advertisement and the opening of 5 overseas offices in North America and Europe. In the 1950s, a number of new hotels were built, and by 1954, for the first time, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas welcomed 142,689 visitors to our shores. tourismtoday.com. This, Mr. Speaker, must no longer be kept as a hidden secret in this country. This is civics, and not just any civics, it's Bahamian civics. Sir Clifford Darling, he won the largest majority of any candidate in the 1967 election, winning 6 consecutive terms in Angliston from 1967 to 1992. I ask you, Mr. Speaker, I ask you, fellow youth parliamentarians, how do we impart this kind of knowledge into our Bahamian youth? The answer is still a mandatory Bahamian civics curriculum in our education system. Thomas Augustus Robinson, in 1957, Robinson became the first Bahamian to win a medal in an international competition where he won a bronze medal in the 100 meters in West India Federation Games in Kingston, Jamaica. In 1958, he set a new Commonwealth Games record in the 200 yards, defeating Harry Jerome, the top-rated sprinter in the world. Mr. Robinson also set the world record in the 300 meters indoors in Canada. Mr. Speaker, we must look no further for this bridge that has landed us in our future. The lack of civics education is on the rise. How do we now stem this issue and convert the Bahamas back to the utopia that it once was? It's simple, Mr. Speaker. Invest. Invest in the youth of our country. Invest in the implementation of a mandatory Bahamian civics curriculum in our education system. Invest in Bahamians. And thus, we will move forward, upward, onward, and together with Bahamian civics, connecting generation to generation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Bean and Grandstown, thank you very much for your contribution. Actually, it has passed 1 o'clock. Therefore, I move that the business of this House will be suspended until 2 p.m. to partake in recess. Please govern yourselves accordingly.
Speaker Keith Roy and his fellow youth parliamentarians today in the morning session of Youth Parliament here. Charlton Stanton representing Mount Moriah, visually impaired, challenging youth and the country to do something about the food bill that we have in the agriculture industry here in the Bahamas. Nicholas Knowles representing Kalani, talking about thinking globally but acting locally. And being challenged again, all of the young people, according to Director of Youth Darren Turnquest, presenting really substantial addresses today as we begin this Youth Parliament. Of course, they are now taking a break for lunch, and we expect 2:30 they will begin the afternoon session again at 6 p.m. this evening. They will join the Governor General, His Excellency Sir Arthur Folks. He's hosting them to a reception as a reward of some sorts for their participation here in this Youth Parliament. Again, the 14th version of Youth Parliament beginning back in 1999. Again, Youth Parliament here on a break now. He'll be back about 2:30 this afternoon. The Parliamentary Channel will have it for you. I'm Anthony Newbold. Enjoy your afternoon.